And get this program started. I hope everyone's had a great morning so far. I know it's a little early, but we have an amazing program for y'all today. We're going to go ahead and get you guys started with JHU Kranti. They are a South Asian a cappella team from Johns Hopkins University, and I'm going to go ahead and just kick it over. Enjoy.
Thank you, Samita, for the lovely introduction. Hello, everyone. I'm Trisha Bakala. I'm president of JHU Kranti, and we thank you for the opportunity to present our set in the context of your summit, Dream and Ambition. We're so honored to be performing here. First, because we believe South Asian fusion a cappella is definitionally a method of uplifting Indian voices. As Indian American students, our medium allows us to present the culture we were born into and the culture we come from as one. Today we're presenting for you Beke Ali, sung by Sachet Tandon, with Happier Than Ever by Billie Eilish, a custom arrangement that together represents resilience and the ability to rise again after failure, whether that be in love or in life.
I could explain it better. I wish it wasn't true.
जो तुझसे दूर हूँ क्यों दूर मैं रहूँ तेरा गरूर हूँ तू फासला मिटा तू ख्वाब सा मिला क्यों ख्वाब तोड़ दूँ
It's embarrassing, you were my everything. All that you did was make me really sad. Don't waste the time, I don't have. Don't try to make me feel bad. I could talk about every time that you showed up on time. I'd have an empty line, cause you never did. You ruined everything good. Always said you were misunderstood. Made all my moments your own. Wish you would leave me alone.
फासलों से हौसलाए टूटता नहीं ना है वो बेवफा और ना मैं हूँ बेवफा वो मेरी आदतों की तरह छूटता नहीं.
All right, how about another round of applause for that? It's unbelievable. Let's just say when I was that age, I was not capable of anything like that. So the generations are getting better as we go on in our journey. Good morning, everybody. My name is Raj Goyal, and I'm very honored and thrilled to be welcoming you here today. I know we're a little bit behind schedule, so we'll get to this incredible first panel that we have. But I do want to thank Kranti from Johns Hopkins again for that incredible performance, and really welcome you here to what promises to be one of the most exciting days really in the history of Indian America and the Indian American experience in America, if you think about that. I'm the co-founder of Impact, if we could please have a very enthusiastic round of applause for Deepak Raj, my co-founder of Impact. You'll hear from him later today and at the gala, but you know, when Deepak and I started Impact and had this crazy idea years ago to say that we should actually have the temerity that the Indian American community should take our politics and our public service as seriously as we take everything else that we do phenomenally well in this community. We don't need to recount the number of incredible business success that we have, many who are in this room, in technology and medicine and in the arts. And so that's why we and the team, and I should also make sure we have an incredible staff, but if we could also have a round of applause for Neil Makija, our executive director, who's incredible. You see, in true Indian American fashion, he's very ambitious. He's getting married in a week. So all he thought it was pretty casual to throw this summit, the largest Indian American gathering in American history, and have a huge Desi wedding in Philadelphia. So good job, Neil, on that one. The theme of this summit is Dream with Ambition. And if you look at these breakouts and if you look at the content that we have today, you'll see Desi leaders just doing this incredible work on all this array of issues, from global climate crisis to misinformation to voting rights. And all of it has this overarching theme, which is exactly this core mission that we had from day one, which Impact will never waver from, which is to build political power for our community, not in a transactional way, but to make sure that we are represented, because as that famous line goes, if you're not at the table, you're on the table. Is that the line? On the menu? Thank you, Raja. I did wake up at 4 in the morning. I apologize for that. But we have an incredible array of speakers today. And just to give you a little bit of context, I don't know if it's audacity or more probably like ignorance, to get elected in 2006, which I believe now feels like 17 eons ago, where I was at age 30 or 31. I had worked here in Washington for John Podesta at the Center for American Progress. And I went out to Wichita, Kansas. That's a rectangular state in the center of this country. You typically fly over it when you're going places, but of course I'm proud that we have such representation from all over today. And I've told this story many times, but I sort of had the fancy degrees. I had gone to Harvard Law School with Raja. I had thought I knew politics. I was fairly well informed on the issues. And then I got out to Wichita and had this notion. I was a sort of protege of Kathleen Sebelius of Podesta. And I got out there and I realized I didn't know a damn thing about how to actually represent voters, how to get elected. I realized that the most important thing I did in that election was know how to put dog treats in my right pocket, because when you're knocking 10,000 doors, the dogs will get you. So you got to learn. And I grew up Desi guy. We didn't have dogs around, so that was the whole learning process for me. I had to ask for contributions. I thought I understood that. I didn't realize really how that worked. Now I've raised $1 million checks, but I remember when a $50 check was a very big deal. And so in 2006 cycle, I believe we had 4 of us who were elected in state legislatures in the country. We now have 4 members of Congress right here. Give them a round of applause. All right. And by the way, these members of Congress, you know, I say this with respect to our august institution, they're not casual backbencher members of Congress. These are leaders who are extraordinarily respected within their party, within their jurisdictions, and within this country, and they all are going places. I don't think any of them are content at where they are now, and of course, our country needs them. Aside from Congress, it's very important, and one of the big missions of Impact is to not be obsessed with Washington. And so it is unbelievable that we have the Vice President of the United States, that goes without saying. We have these members of Congress, but we are electing people up and down the ballot. And so we have later today Jay Chowdhury, who's the first Indian American state legislator in North Carolina. We have Keisha Ram, the first ever South Asian state senator in Vermont and a future congresswoman who's here. We have Nikhil Saval, the first South Asian elected to the Pennsylvania State Senate, and Bushra Amiwala from the Skokie Board of Education, who's the youngest elected Muslim woman in America. And so give them a round of applause, please. You know, for me personally, I get sort of the warm and fuzzies when I think about people at the local level. We have judges here from Texas. We've got people, as I said, up and down the ballot who all they want to do is serve their community, and they're starting in the best possible way. You know, in the early parts of the community when I first started, we did have some folks who sort of jumped in and thought, hey, I'm going to run for president. I'm going to run for these big offices without really putting in that spade work, without really putting in that time. And now it's so extraordinarily fruitful and inspiring to see our community become so mature politically, and to be honest, we're just getting started. Deepak and I were just chatting about this. Our big first inaugural summit was 2018, where we had several great speakers. Then we had a great one in 19. Of course, we hit COVID. We had a transformational gift to the organization in 2020. We have many of our anchor donors here. Of course, Deepak is the anchor donor, which we will forever be grateful for. And you know, he took a chance on a crazy guy like me pitching this idea and put some hard-earned money out there to actually make it happen. But now, as we say in the tech world, the flywheel is spinning, and now the organization is stable with a staff of 8, I believe it is, Neil, with a stable budget of multi-million dollars. And look at this crowd that we have today at 9 in the morning here at the Willard. So I just wanted to say, from sort of the co-founder perspective, we couldn't be more excited to have you here. We have our first ever gala tonight. I hope that we can retain most of you for tonight. We've got a lot of folks who aren't here this morning who are coming here tonight. And so thank you again for your support of Impact, for being here. And without further ado, let me get the show on the road. So I'd like to introduce the moderator for this incredible panel, who's one of my personal heroes, Signa Suer, who is the founder and CEO of the Juggernaut. And this is such a cool company. For those of you, again, in the tech world, it's a Y Combinator company. It's a venture-backed company, and it tells smart South Asian stories. So if you ever thought about how it is so unbelievable how we've come as a community, we now have venture-backed media companies run by female entrepreneurs who are incredibly smart about how and nuanced about how we tell the story of our community. And yeah, she went to Harvard Business School and graduated from Yale, but that's kind of table stakes at this point, right, folks? What we're really talking about is the work that they do and the things they do for our community. So Snigna, the floor is yours, and to our members of Congress, thank you for being here, and thank you all for being here. Take care.
Thanks so much, Raj, for that introduction, and so great to be here. I get the honor of introducing our wonderful representatives. So before I begin, Representative Pramila Jayapal couldn't make it. She tested positive for COVID, and she really wanted to be here, so I just need to share her regrets. But we have, I've told the others, they're gonna punch it up, so they're here to represent her as well. So before I begin, so without further ado, here are our wonderful panelists. First, U.S. Representative Ro Khanna, who represents California 17. Congressman Ro Khanna has served the heart of Silicon Valley in the U.S. House since 2016. Representative Khanna works hard to ensure our nation is focused on creating new tech jobs across the country, particularly for communities left behind. He sits on the House Agriculture, Armed Services, and Oversight and Reform Committees. He is also the Democratic Vice Chair of the House Caucus on India and Indian Americans. Welcome, Congressman Ro Khanna. Next, we have Representative Raja Krishnamurthy. Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy represents the 8th District of Illinois, which includes Chicago's west and northwest suburbs, a strong advocate for job creation and global vaccine equity. Representative Krishnamurthy serves on the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, the Select Subcommittee on the Coronavirus Crisis, and the Committee on Oversight and Reform. Welcome. And this person is definitely last, but definitely not the least. He's apparently the most tenured person in Congress among us. So Representative Ami Bera, representing California 7, first elected to the US House in 2012. I know some of us might have been very, very young at that point. Congressman Ami Bera is the longest serving Indian American member of Congress. Representative Bera is a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee and a senior member on the House Committee on Science, Space, and Technology. He's also a doctor, so, you know. So I just wanted, before I even begin, I just want to talk and echo some of the sentiments that Raj has spoken about. So first of all, what a historic moment. I don't think when any of us were younger, we would have ever imagined that we're sitting in a country where 4 of the representatives in Congress are South Asian American and specifically Indian American. And on top of that, the vice president is Black and Indian. So I first want to say a huge round of applause to the world we live in right now. And we're just getting started, right? So, okay, so the first question that I have to ask is, this summit is named Dream with Ambition. Does anybody know where that phrase comes from? Anybody? Okay, that's cheating. That's cheating. You guys are in Congress. Okay, anybody else? Okay, Raja Krishnamurthy, since you are the class expert here, do you want to? He's a smart one. Tell the audience where Dream with Ambition comes from.
I think that was in Kamala Harris's inaugural speech, right?
Exactly. Okay. So you got this. You got this. 10 points for Gryffindor. So dream with ambition, lead with conviction, and see yourselves in a way that others might not, simply because they've never seen it before. That's what Vice President Kamala Harris said. So I want to ask each member sitting in front of me today, what does dream with ambition mean to you?
Well, first of all, thank you, Singha. It's an honor to be here. Wonderful. Raj Goyal was a trailblazer. Thank you, Raj, for your leadership. Deepak Raj, thank you for your vision. Neil, you've just done an extraordinary job, and really an honor to be here with Raja and Ami, Pramila. You know, one of the things people often ask me is, do all of you Indian Americans get along? And we do. We do. You know, and you know, there have been a lot of times where we help each other, and there's really not been much conflict in the time I've been in Congress, and it's a real strength, and I really value Raja and Ami as friends. I think dream with ambition to me means you have to take risks. You know, I lost twice. I ran against an incumbent. I know we have 2 folks here who are running for Congress, Acacia and Victoria Virasing. And, you know, I remember when I ran against an incumbent in my own party in 2004, I'd enter the room and everyone else would run away. And, you know, it's easy to support people once we've won. It's much harder to support people before they've won. And I think what dream with ambition means is that it takes risk, it takes conceiving of things that may not seem possible, and it means supporting people so that we have more than 4 members of Congress early, knowing they may lose, knowing they may have to do it a few times, and really being bold about that and encouraging people to take non-conventional paths.
Well, I think, you know, I agree with everything that Rose said. I think we dream with ambition, and since it's 9 a.m., we wake up with ambition. And that means you take action. And so I actually ran twice before I won. And I remember the first time I walked into, I walked into a room in Chicago. And I introduced myself. Hi, I said, my name is Raja Krishnamurthy. And the person looked right back at me and said, Roger Christian Murphy. Very nice to meet you. And they said, I didn't know the Irish made it to India. And so that, you know, it's you know, when you have that ambition, it really behind the ambition is like the why me and why now, and why are we in this? And I think everyone on this stage and everyone in the audience is in public service or aspires to for the right reasons. And before I forget, I just want to say a special thank you to Raj Goyal and Deepak and Neil. Raj Goyal was my law school classmate, and we used to talk about these things in law school. And now here we are actually, you know, using that ambition and transforming it into action. Deepak is just one of the finest people you're ever going to meet. And then Neil, you know, I asked Neil, he said to me, I'm getting married in 10 days. And I said, but didn't you take your honeymoon in May? And then he said, oh yeah, we had the plans, we couldn't change it. And I said, that's so desi. That's awesome. The last point is I just want to say thank you to all of you for investing in the three of us and others who are running, because you know, you're doing it for the right reasons. You don't know what's going to happen. As one time I said to a group of VC people something like, look, you guys, you invest in a lot of bad companies all the time. Just send a few $100s my way. And they did, and here we are. So thank you for everything. Thank you for everything that you do as well.
And I'll just play off both Ro and Raj's comments. I think how I would sum up what Ro said is, don't be afraid. Like, put yourself out there. You never know what's going to happen. And you know, for all of us with the shared experience, you know, growing up in the households that we did, blending the culture from India, but also blending the American dream, you know, that's what it's all about. I mean, we've all been pushed to achieve, so don't be afraid. I think we all ran and lost the first time we ran, but we learned a lot. And you know, Raja said, why me and why now? I'd actually change that to why not me and why not now? And I look at the next generation that's coming up. You know, when I first ran in 2010, you know, it was hard to find organizations in the Indian American world or the South Asian world to help us. Raj was out on the campaign trail running for Congress along with Manan Trivedi and a few others. So in a short decade, we're starting to build infrastructure, we're starting to build organizations. You're seeing, as Raj pointed out, the number of folks that are getting elected to local office. We've got attorney generals, we've got state legislators, we've got the mayor of Cincinnati. It's happening, and I think it's all happening, you know, in a natural progression with, you know, the generation that's rising. And you know, I'll give a shout out to Indian American women. I think they're going to make this mark, right? They're going to take it and move it forward, and I think that's a good thing as the father of a daughter. So I just, you know, when I got elected, you know, one of my first speeches, I was the only Indian American member of Congress, and said, look, over this next decade, let's go from one South Asian to 5 South Asians. It didn't take us a decade. You know, in 2016, you know, Raja Rowan Pramila got elected along with Senator Harris at that time. So it took us 4 years to go from 1 to 5. You know, there's no reason we can't go from 5 to 10 or 15 in this next decade. I don't think it'll take us a decade, though.
One thing that's been really interesting to see in all of your backgrounds is that many of you all did the kind of model minority myth thing first, like becoming doctors and lawyers before becoming, you know, before joining public service. As South Asian Americans and Indian Americans, how have your backgrounds, not just your ethnicities and cultures, but also your backgrounds as doctors, lawyers, and people working in tech and corporate world, influenced and impacted your work in Congress? How has that lens changed what you prioritize and what you choose to work on?
I'm going to start on this. Yeah. So I'm a good South Asian kid. I went to medical school first. After which my mom and dad's like, okay, you can do whatever you want to do now. You know, it really, yeah. When I had never run for office before, and you know, got involved in President Obama's campaign early on in 2007, and you know, when he got elected, I knew he was going to work on healthcare, and it's like, yeah, I could sit on the sidelines, or I could try to get in the game, and you know, that's, you know, so that influenced why I chose to run, because you know, healthcare I knew he was going to work on healthcare. how my background's influenced what I do in Congress, though, is I couldn't get on any of the select healthcare committees, so I figured where could I have impact? And when I first got elected, I got more coverage in India than I did out here, which is what led me to the Foreign Affairs Committee and led me to get on the subcommittee on Asia and the Pacific, because I figured I could work on U.S.-India policies and use the bully pulpit that I had. Today, I'm chair of the subcommittee on Asia, the Pacific, and Central Asia, so have huge impact in congressional policy as we look at Asia, and certainly as we look at India. You know, we can have a whole conversation about what's going on in India now, but I think the U.S.-India relationship and how we use that to move forward is hugely important. And I recognize I got a bully pulpit as an Indian American member of Congress who also chairs the subcommittee, so can have direct conversations with the Indian government.
Anybody else want to comment, or we can move on?
Sure. Yeah, I kind of had a little bit of a Desi experience growing up, where my father said to me in high school, he said, "Raja, you can do anything you want to do in life." I said, "Really?" He said, "Yes. You can be a civil engineer, mechanical engineer, electrical engineer, computer engineer, or a doctor." And I ended up getting a BS in mechanical engineering. Of course, a lot of people accuse me of practicing the BS part now, but you know, I ended up getting a mechanical engineering degree, and then I got a law degree, practiced for a while, and then you know, did stints in the public and private sector before being elected in 2016. I guess my background informs some of the work I do, some of the causes that I pursue. So immigration. I was born in India, and I feel a very special kinship to all immigrants, but especially children of immigrants, whether they're dreamers or the children of H-1B workers. So I am pursuing legislation with regard to H-1B, as well as documented dreamers, but also all. I think I'm an original co-sponsor on every single immigration issue in Congress at this point. I also ended up, when my parents hit the economic skids in the recession of 1973, which is when we first got here, we were allowed to move into public housing and food stamps. So I'm a child of public relief. So all public relief programs, to me, are an essential ladder for people who might fall down and need to get up. And so I am passionately advocating that we not chip away at that social safety net. And then, you know, finally, you know, just like all of you, you know, or a lot of you, I'm a racial, religious, and ethnic minority, and I have 29 letters in my name. And so I hate, like all of the three people on this stage. So I am constantly trying to do whatever I can on that front. And now I'm going to be pitching both of you pretty soon, but we're going to put a bill forward, a resolution against the replacement theory. And we can talk about that later. But that affects every single person in this audience, because it's real, and it's motivating hate, and it's motivating violence, including what happened in Buffalo.
I certainly will support that, and I appreciate, Raja, your leadership. One of the things, because you brought up hate, that I wanted to mention is, I don't know how many people saw this video that's been circulating about this kid, Sean Prithami, in Copel Middle School, and I you know, was going to talk to you and Ami about it, but it's outrageous. Basically, he gets choked by this school and almost could have gotten paralyzed or died, and then the school punishes him instead of the kid who is actually choking him. And from what I read, it turns out that the father of the kid who choked him was running for the school board and connected to that school. So when you say, why does representation matter, these are the types of incidents where it matters, because there are many times that Raja or Ami or Pramila would lead something, and then you, instead of just having one member of Congress, have 4. If they had 8 of them, you know, people can't have impunity to bully what happened to Sean in Texas. Totally unconscionable. I'll just say my background, parents were a little bit different. Even though my father was an engineer, my grandfather spent 4 years in jail during Gandhi's independence movement and was part of the first parliament in India. So my parents were always encouraging of public service, of getting involved. And I guess the one thing I would say is, don't become cynical about politics. Don't be embarrassed. I'm always amazed young people, they're almost timid to say they're interested in running for office or politics. It's an amazing, amazing calling. Anytime you step into the Congress, you're helping shape the most powerful nation in the world, and you're shaping the direction of the nation and the world, and people should be proud of getting involved in the American political process.
Can I add something? Because I'm going to have to, unfortunately, step off. Part of having four of us is that we can divide and conquer, and you'll see a number of South Asian, Indian American kids on the Hill this week because they're documented dreamers, and we've got a press conference really raising the stakes and hopefully passing our bill to protect these documented dreamers. But that's advocacy, right? These kids are fighting for their future, and they're up on the Hill, they're talking to members of Congress, and that didn't happen when I was their age. I was an intern when I was 20 here on Capitol Hill. I didn't see anyone who looked like me on the Hill. Fast forward to today, we've all have South Asian, Indian American staff. You've got 4 members of Congress, you've got chiefs of staff. So, and you've got all these documented dreamers knocking on doors and telling their story. So thank you for the support that you give us. We're going to divide and conquer. You guys hold the fort down here. I'm going to go up to the Hill, and we're going to get this bill passed. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Ami. So as Ami walks out, we are actually going to talk about a lot of key issues, and one of the issues on the docket is immigration. So I'd love a show of hands. How many of us are immigrants? Yeah, that's a lot. So, more than 1 million people, largely of Indian descent, are stuck in the green card backlog with no foreseeable path to citizenship. In addition, upwards of 200,000 children of these long-term visa holders, some of them are in the room, will age out of their dependent visa status at age 21. There's also dreamers. And many people don't know this, but Indian Americans are also the second largest group of illegal immigrants in the US. And no one really talks about that. So I'd love to ask this panel, and I know we just lost Ami, but hopefully he'll hear some of the answers as he walks out. How can the US address its convoluted and sometimes arduous immigration policies? What's the path forward there?
Oh, yeah, sure. So I'll first talk about the bill that I have co-led with some others to basically end the per-country quota or cap that really, yeah, you should clap. It's a disaster. So basically, if you are an Indian national and you come to this country on an H-1B and you were to apply for a green card today, it would take you 80 years, 80 years, to get a green card. Now, that's absolutely unacceptable, but even the past delays have been unacceptable. And I found this out because I was at a meeting in Springfield, Illinois, which is the capital of Illinois, and I talked about this issue, H-1Bs, and my bill, and this person in the audience said to me, Raja, I have a question. And I said, what is it? He said, his name was Dr. Patel. And Dr. Patel said, I'm an H-1B holder. And I said, I don't understand. You've been here like 14 years, and you're one of the most distinguished nephrologists in town. You have your own practice and so forth. But he said, no, I have 14 more years to go. And I said, okay, well, I will do everything I can to pass my bill, which will end the per-country quota, and then it will allow you to matriculate a lot faster. But I don't know when that's going to happen, so what's your plan B? And he told me, well, my plan B is that young girl there. She's 4 years old, and she was born in Springfield. She's my daughter, and in 14 years, she's going to sponsor me for a green card. And that is just completely unacceptable, but that's the story for so many of our H-1B holders. I was very close to getting this passed through the Senate. It's passed through the House a couple times, but it got held up by a couple Republican senators who believe that this is a good, they don't want to be seen passing an piece of immigration reform right now because it's bad politics for them. So it's good for them to hold on to this. And that is the problem that we have, even on excellent pieces of bill with a lot of bipartisan support now, where immigration has become a four-letter word in the other caucus. We have a documented Dreamer bill as well, which is for the children of H-1B dependents. And that one has also got a lot of bipartisan support, but it's not moving because of this intransigence. So that is the central issue that we need to work on, which is everyone in this room, if you know Republican senators especially, we need to get 10 of them. And we need to call it for a vote in the Senate, and that will really kind of move things along at this point.
Roger's really led, and I'm proud to be a co-sponsor of his bill to end the visa backlog. I mean, it makes no sense economically because being on H-1B visa for a long time has a depressive effect on American wages because the American labor market then is competing against someone who has less mobility. If you put someone on a green card, they have more mobility, it will drive up wages. So actually, the policy currently is hurting American workers. And you're also creating a situation where people are in this country, but they have no incentive, or their families have no incentive to embrace the American narrative, to embrace American history, to embrace American citizenship. So you're actually creating a community of others where you want to be creating a community of patriots. Our challenge is that there's a lot of fear right now on immigrants. The fear fundamentally is, bluntly, I often joke, are we going to play baseball or cricket in America? Are we going to what's going to happen to American culture? And I think the challenge of the immigrant community is to remind people that we tend to be, immigrants and kids of immigrants, the most patriotic Americans in the entire nation, because people came to America by choice. Millions of people still want to come to America. I know my parents thought they still think this is the greatest nation in the world. How many people here think that America is the greatest nation? You know, it's a lot. You know, we have to talk about that more. We have to convince people that this is not a threat to patriotism. It's not a threat to America. It's enhancing America's ability to lead in the 21st century.
Thank you for those answers, and I think that a lot of people are very interested in what happens with immigration policy in the U.S. Okay, next hot topic issue, the economy. So, you know, right now we're in a critical period in the U.S. economy. There's rising inflation, higher interest rates to tamp down the inflation, and a falling stock market as a result. So how do you think the country should be navigating the situation, and what is the role of government in situations like these?
Well, the inflation is being caused primarily because we offshored so much of our production. We're not producing enough in America. We have too much money chasing too few goods. And, you know, millions of jobs were offshored to China, millions of jobs went to Mexico. And you now have a situation where we can't make baby formula enough in this country. We can't make new batteries in this country. We're not making the steel in this country. We need the government to partner with the private sector to have massive production. And there are certain things I've recommended the administration bluntly needs to be more aggressive. I mean, why aren't we buying the baby formula from Europe and then subsidizing it into the American markets? I heard Secretary Buttigieg say, well, the government doesn't make baby formula. Yeah, but the government can incentivize and provide loans and assistance to produce this. In World War II, it took 4 months for us to go from making 3,000 planes to 50,000 planes. You're telling me we can't solve the baby formula crisis in this country? It's a lack of boldness, a lack of enough imagination. We should be having the government buy on the global markets wheat and food and milk at subsidized prices, and then selling them back to the American public. We did this actually in World War II, and President Reagan did it in the early 80s. So I think we have to have a more robust, vigorous role for government to stimulate production and to take measures that will bring price stability.
So I don't disagree with anything Rose said. I'll just add a couple points. One is, right now we have this huge bipartisan infrastructure deal that got signed into law back in November. And I think it's critical that we direct the investments to unwind some of the bottlenecks in the logistics that exist either at ports or inland ports with railroad junctions. Chicago, which I represent, the Chicago area, has 6 Class 1 railroads through that area. And I can tell you, it's a huge bottleneck right now for much of the freight that traverses the country. So that's one thing. The second thing is, so I chair the House Oversight Subcommittee on Economic and Consumer Policy, and there's definitely inflation going on. There's certainly more demand than supply across the board in so many goods, but in certain areas where there's tremendous market concentration, there's also predatory pricing going on. I'll just give you one example. In meat processing, there are 4 companies that control 90% of meat processing. And while their input costs did rise, for sure, their net profits went up by 500% over the course of 2 years. And so we have to obviously make sure that there's not anti-competitive behavior going on under the cover of inflation, while at the same time addressing the underlying issue. The final point I just wanted to mention, along with long-term issues that Ami mentioned, is our labor force participation rate by women is at a low. I think 1.5 million women have dropped out of the labor force since the start of the pandemic. And one of the biggest issues that I hear over and over again from my constituents, I'm sure you are affected as well, is the lack of childcare. Lack of childcare. And this is an easy one that we should, in Washington, D.C., help with, which unfortunately has gotten stuck in politics. And if we could do something which, for instance, European countries do, which is really partner and help subsidize the cost of childcare, which is so expensive in most states, it will help to incentivize, especially single moms, but working parents, to come back into the workforce. And if we can do that, that will help immeasurably with creating those goods and services that we need to tame inflation, certainly over the medium and long term.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I think that's been top of mind for so many people. And it's always interesting how the economy becomes a bipartisan kind of like partisanal issue instead of kind of approaching it with economics. Okay, next hot button topic, abortion rights. We have to talk about this. And unfortunately, we don't have Pramila Jayapal here with us, but you both will be able to speak about this as well. If you haven't been keeping track, but I know everyone has, a leaked memo from the Supreme Court showed that some members of the Supreme Court are likely to overturn Roe v. Wade, which guaranteed at federal level, the right to an abortion. And if that goes away, that has become a very dangerous issue for many, many people in terms of reproductive rights. So I'd love to hear from both of you. The Senate even stopped a bill that would help kind of, bolster that. What's happening? Why is this happening now? And what can we do? Because this is clearly not just a political issue. This is also a health issue. This is also a choice issue for women.
I think there's palpable anger and outrage around the country and certainly in Congress among the Democratic side that people's rights are being taken away. I can't remember another time in my life where a right is being taken away. I mean, we've had moments where we haven't granted rights based on equality, but this is actually moving backwards. It's moving the country backwards 50 years because of an ideology and a conservative movement that has fundamentally rejected the principle of equality between men and women. I mean, that's really what I think Roe versus Wade is about, that a woman has an equal right to her body and to her reproductive rights and making those decisions with her doctor as opposed to being told what to do. My concern, bluntly, is I saw the results of Pennsylvania last night, the elections, and the Republican turnout is up 63% from 2010 primary, and compared to 2010, the Democratic turnout was up 17%. I'm saying, how are we not getting out and voting? How are we not mobilizing? I mean, the anger, the tweets, all of that is fine, but ultimately, the only way to codify Roe versus Wade, to protect Roe versus Wade, to prevent the Republicans from getting the House and the Senate and passing a ban on abortion nationwide. I mean, don't be content if you're in California or Illinois and think we're safe, because the Republicans, if they get the control, could pass. I mean, McConnell has said it's on the table. The only way to do it is to mobilize, and I'm concerned that people haven't gotten that message yet, that the stakes of this election.
Speaking of the elephant in the womb, I think that this is, first of all, I want to just talk about Premila for one moment, because she actually testified in front of the committee on which I sit, the Oversight Committee, very eloquently about her own healthcare experience in this regard. She had an abortion, and she talked about in very kind of painful ways what led to her decision and how important it was for her own individual autonomy and independence. And that is really what is at stake here. It's about whether or not we believe in gender equity. I think that is really what's on the ballot in addition to reproductive freedom. But at stake, in addition to reproductive freedom, are other essential rights. Because you know that this is just the beginning. Because the right to contraception, the right to birth control, the right to enter a gay marriage, and the fundamental right to privacy, which was really at the heart of the holding or the decision in Roe v. Wade, is under attack. And so now, as Roe rightly pointed, it's up to us to mobilize. You know, well, obviously, the final decision has not been issued, but I think that it's going to come out probably by June, by the end of this term, and in time for us to mobilize for the elections. Up till now, a lot of my colleagues on the other side have cynically supported the overturning of Roe v. Wade because they thought it would never happen. And now they're like the dog that caught the car. And I think we need to make them pay for it. We need to get them the hell out of office if they believe in that. And then we need to elect people on both sides who believe in reproductive freedom. On the other side, for years, they've made this almost a single issue for many elections. And it's time that we do the same on our side. That's what I believe.
Thanks for sharing that. I think with all of these policies, the people who often get hurt the most are the ones who have the least choice. And I think that's what's really sad about so much of what's been happening. Because this issue is also about state versus federal. And I think a lot of people are saying, well, the states can decide. But I think not everyone has the ability to just move to another state just because they don't like the laws. And I think that's something we forget to talk about. Okay, last topic issue before I move on to some personal questions for both of you. As we see increasing globalization, there is more and more pressure to not only speak up about domestic issues, but also international ones, as well as even because of your backgrounds, India issues. How do you balance that? Because you're not living in two countries at the same, at least to my knowledge. So how do you balance those competing pressures and the need to speak up?
Well, Angela, let me just say, I see the room is filled up now with Indian Standard Time. Everyone is here. But I wanted to point out, I see Aziz Hanifa. I don't know, Raja, if it was your case. Aziz used to be writing for India Abroad. And my parents, it didn't matter if I was in the New York Times or anything. It didn't really count unless you were in India Abroad. And Aziz had written about it. And he's got a new platform that I was on the streaming service. So he's one of the great journalists, and just wanted to give him a shout out.
Go Aziz.
I joke around. I have a district that's majority Asian, a significant Indian American population, Pakistani American population, Filipino, Chinese, Japanese, Palestinian, Israeli. I say every global conflict is in my district. And, you know, you can't, as a member of Congress, opine about every single issue in other countries. I mean, that, you know, the constituents care most about the price of gas. They care about, are they getting their baby formula? They care about good jobs. And that is the primary role of a member of Congress. But what I do is I talk about broader themes of that one, America needs to be engaged in the world, not isolated from the world. America needs to stand up for pluralism. We need to stand up for a respect for all faiths. We need to stand up for a respect for human rights. And then I apply that in context of what American advocacy should look like, and that we need an important strategic relationship with India because it's in the United States' interest to lead in the 21st century. And then from that framework, you know, I will take positions. I think one clear place where we all came together was on the vaccines. When we saw that there was a crisis in India and they weren't getting vaccines, I think Raja and I, bluntly, were the only two members of Congress on TV and talking about saying, look, this is not acceptable. We've got to get vaccines. So where there are big issues, where there's clearly in the American interest or humanitarian interest, I definitely speak out. But I don't think it is fair to have an Indian American opine on every single part of Indian politics. In many cases, I have no clue of, like, what people say, what party won in what state. I say, I have no idea. I mean, that's not my job. My job is to represent my district in the United States.
I think that I echo a lot of what Rose said. I also like to tell my good friends on all sides is, like, I think it's perfectly acceptable for you to root for your home teams, but remember that here we are confronting some clear and present dangers that we have to stand shoulder to shoulder against. As long as we can do that, then it's perfectly okay to have these arguments and disagreements and discussions about policies in other countries. I'll just say one shout out, which is obviously this is India's 75th year of independence. And I just saw that The Economist had India on the front cover, and it has a roaring economy right now. And its export industry is doing extremely well, and I like to say its greatest export is you. And I think Indian Americans are probably the greatest kind of vindication of the values that made India special. Although I say that just as here in India, I do believe that secular democracy is under pressure. And that's something that we have to fight for everywhere. And you know, having lived through January 6th, Ro and I were in the Capitol, and there was a bomb placed 200 feet from my office window. And I was evacuated 3 times that day. And even today, I cannot watch coverage of January 6th. I turn off the TV. And there's a cop that shows up to my house in the morning once, and then the evening every day, because of active threats coming from January 6th. Why? Because you and I, in a lot of people's world vision in this country, believe that we are threats under the Great Replacement Theory. The Great Replacement Theory is that elites in this country, namely Jews and others, are trying to replace white people with non-white people. And so we are squarely in the crosshairs of almost a non-trivial part of this country. So if we are going to be talking about all these other global issues and not talking about what's right and staring us in the face, then we're in trouble. So that's the one message that I try to get across over and over again, because I think that we, having lived through this, know what the stakes are right now for our democracy and Indian Americans as well or better than anyone else.
Thanks for sharing that. I'm going to ask now specific questions related to both of your specialties. I'll start with Representative Khanna. You call yourself a progressive capitalist and have enjoyed support from those in tech, VC, and business. You also wrote a book recently called The Digital Age, which is about decentralizing economic opportunities. For those who haven't read your book, and for those who don't know as well, can you explain in 2 minutes or less, what does it mean to be a progressive capitalist, and what does it mean to decentralize economic opportunities to you?
Well, thanks for the shameless plug on the book. I don't.
Is it on Amazon, bro?
I feel no hesitation now plugging my book, Dignity of Digital Age, after I was with Speaker Pelosi at a Codel, and we were talking. This was at the Munich Security Conference, and the German Chancellor were talking about what's going to happen if Russia invades, and all of a sudden he goes on this tangent of how he wrote this book in 15 years ago about how Germany was going to become a multiracial democracy like America. And he's going on for minutes and minutes until his aide interrupts him and says, see, there you go. He's Chancellor of Germany, still hawking that damn book or something. So now I realize you could always support your book. But look, progressive capitalism is, in my view, is a very simple thing. And that is that you ought to have the education and healthcare and nutrition to be able to succeed. Let me be a little provocative. I often joke with my parents and in-laws. They say, well, we came here with $8 in our pocket. I was like, yeah, and you came here with great degrees and families who really encouraged you. I want that for everyone. I don't think it's that complicated. I believe in the markets and innovation, but it's outrageous that in this country we have people go thousands of dollars in debt to complete their education. It's outrageous that we have people have medical debt to get health care. It's outrageous that we don't invest in preschool education when France has been doing that since 1900. Progressive capitalism means invest in people so they have a shot to have economic prosperity. And the book makes the case that you can't have all the prosperity in my district or in New York. My district has produced more wealth than any place in the world. $11 trillion. When people say socialism, I was like, well, we've produced a lot of wealth. I mean, more wealth than anywhere else. Can't really say it's socialism. But at the same time, you've had the hollowing out, the deindustrialization of so many parts in this country. That's not sustainable. We've got to have economic revitalization in places that have been totally left out, where young kids are leaving those communities, where folks are in their 60s and 70s and saying, what's happened to our town? And they have to have a vision for economic prosperity for the 21st century. And as much as I love the infrastructure bill, just building roads and bridges is not going to bring back those good jobs. We need more. We need a real vision for how we're going to have economic prosperity in these communities.
Representative, well, thank you for that, Representative Khanna. I think that's very critical. I think we've also seen the hollowing out of, like you said, of rural America, which you talk a lot about, and the drug crisis. So, Representative Krishnamurthy, okay, you're in the hot seat. So we're going to ask you a couple of health questions. As you mentioned, you were at the forefront about making sure that there was more vaccine equality during the heart of the COVID pandemic crisis in 2020. We're in 2022, and the crisis really hasn't gone away. What do you think the government or even private companies should be doing today to combat COVID? How do we kind of actually get rid of this pandemic, or do we not? That's the first question. And the second is, hopefully you can represent Pramila Jayapal a little bit here, the heart health bill. When we think about South Asian Americans, there are very specific, heart issues, and we're very predisposed to certain diseases that many people don't talk about or even measure. So I'd love if you could comment on that as well.
Sure. Let me take the second one first, because I do want to plug Pramila's heart health bill. Many of you know, but South Asian Americans, Indian Americans have a 4 times greater likelihood of developing heart disease than others in this country. And that's why I think in all of our families and among our friends, our close friends, we see so many of them suffer heart attacks, other heart ailments at such a young age. And this is something that has to be studied, and it has to be studied rigorously. And this is the gist of Pramila's bill, which is getting marked up in the Energy and Commerce Committee today. So again, when we talk about our own experiences and why it's important for Indian Americans and Desis to be in Congress, this is a prime example. With regard to the first issue about vaccines, so the genesis of this was that 3 of my relatives died of the Delta variant in India back in the April-May timeframe when Delta hit India so hard, and I think everyone in this room was probably touched in some way. It was about as desperate a situation as you'll ever find. And so I basically made it known to the administration that, you know, we've got to basically give our vaccines away to the rest of the world at this point because for 2 reasons. One, it's the morally right thing to do, and it's the smart thing to do. Because as you know, COVID anywhere is a threat to everyone, everywhere. By this point, we know that any variant anywhere in the world is going to make its way here. And we've seen that with the first variant, then Delta, Omicron, and what's next. So I've been pushing this repeatedly with a group of people, including Senator Warren and others. And unfortunately, although it has been a talking point for the administration, it hasn't manifested itself in policy. And so I've been, along with others, basically calling for this as part of every appropriations package at this point, because I think that, look, if we really want to end this pandemic, we need to get the 2.5 billion people who are unvaccinated vaccinated. Otherwise, watch out. We're going to be seeing variant after variant, and God forbid that there's a variant more transmissible or as transmissible as Omicron, the B2 version, and as severe or more severe than the Delta. We can't have a situation where it defeats our vaccines, and we can't ever go back to where we were before. So that's why I'm pressing on this as hard as I can right now, but we need more and more voices doing the same.
Thanks for sharing that. I mean, I just want to ask the audience, because we haven't asked you in a while, like how many of you know folks who have some form of heart disease in your family? Yeah. And then the second question, how many of you know somebody who was affected by the crisis in India when Delta was happening? Yeah. And I think that's been one of the most interesting things to see, I think, in Congress, which is the world is more interconnected than ever before. And because of representation and representatives like you, we are able to see some of these issues come to light. So thank you for your service on that, truly. We're coming to a close. I know this was so amazing to have you both here. I have one final question before we let everyone go. So, as you know, some of people call you the Samosa Caucus. And I really, really need to know, A, do you guys know who came up with this name? And if you...
Roger.
Raja, you came up with this name? Okay, so A, do you actually...
He's got to have some claim to fame. I mean, come on.
So I think people really want to know. So now we know the mystery. You came up with this name. Do you actually like this name? Or if you were to rename it, would you call yourself something different now that it's 2022?
You know, somebody was telling me that, so I've mentioned this a couple of times, and someone was saying, Raja, why not pakora? Then someone else said, why not idli vade?
Or mango.
Or mango. Or then I was in front of a Gujarati community and said, Hama patra. That would really summarize what you are. But the point is, I think I came up with it in January 2017 when we first got, we took the oath of office. And ever since then, I've just basically said we need more samosas in Congress. And we need Congress to look like America. And when it does, it performs better. We obviously joke that we're the Samosa Caucus, or other people call us that, but actually, we're just a group of friends who actually partner on a lot of issues together because of our shared experiences and values.
I think what Roger did, I mean, obviously, I would say got the best sense of humor of the 4 of us. Not a high bar, but
tallest midget.
But the fact is that it's possible, even back in 2017, for us to be so comfortable in our own skin. And that's not to be underestimated. You don't have to hide who you are. And what I say to folks often, I mean, America is becoming more multiracial, more multi-ethnic in spite of itself. You can't stop. I don't care whether you're Donald Trump or Trumpism, you can't stop the expression of diverse traditions, diverse histories, diverse cultures that are oozing out of every part of this country. And, you got a Vietnamese American running for Secretary of State in Georgia. When I was growing up, I don't know, I'm sure with you, our family, we couldn't get an appointment with a staffer to a member of Congress. Now you have 4 Indian Americans. As much as I terribly dislike Dr. Oz, the fact that a Muslim American of Turkish origin is winning the Republican primary in Pennsylvania, I mean, it's the country will get there. And that's, I think, what all of you should take, and what Raja and I and others have been saying, that's the fight. Are we going to become a multiracial, multi-ethnic democracy? And that's why summits like this are so important, because your activism, your involvement will help us get there faster.
Okay, is there anything else you'd like to leave the audience with before we let you go?
No, do you?
The only thing I would say is today, as you leave this summit, I think that it's really important to remember 3 things that you do. 1, we have to vote. We don't vote in our numbers nearly enough. And I've looked at the polling on this so many times, even in my own constituency, which has a huge Indian American and Desi segment, that we talk politics, but we don't do politics. So and the second thing is, you all know this in your bones, we got to work on causes bigger than us, even in the political sphere. I think everybody in our communities has become very philanthropic and charitable, and they prioritize the mandir and the temple and the mosque and the church and so forth. But let's think about the political causes that we're going to rally around, whatever it is. And then third, it's time to run for office. We've said this before, Ro and I, and Ami and Pramila, but I think it's really time to think about how do you cultivate people within your own friend circle, within your own family, or yourself. And start thinking, how do you run for the right office, and where is it going to be, and so forth. And what are you going to do? Remember, you can run for Congress, but not in my congressional district. But anyway, I just want to say thank you for your time.
Thanks so much, Jim. Should we do a photo?
Snake that. Thank you so much.
I'm now going to hand it over to Neil. So thank you so much, Neil.
Please, everyone, give another round of applause to Snigdha for moderating and to our members of Congress. Before we break out, I just want to make a quick announcement. You'll get a chance to see Raja and Ro tonight as well, but thank you all for being here. It's really wonderful to see so many leaders from around the country. We're going to break out. The climate panel is going to be on the first floor. And then we're going to have a number of other panels. You got to walk up the stairs to the elevator to go upstairs. We're going to come back here for lunch. You're going to hear from Minnie Timmaraju, who's the president of NARAL, one of our founding board members at the Impact Project, and a panel of senior officials in the White House on a Women Who Lead panel. And I'm excited to have you all back for the reception as well. That's going to be outside here. And if you have any questions about the gala, if you haven't signed up, please just ask our staff. But I also want to thank a couple of people. And just tell you, if you really liked what you heard from the members that are here right now, part of what Impact does is elevate those issues that they're working on. So when Raja was working on the NOVID Act, we helped create that bill, push it out there, and disseminate it. And our goal is to reach not just the people in this room, but the 5 million South Asians across the country. So you'll get your photos. I promise. We'll meet the members out in the back, but if I can just thank a couple more people. Deepak Raj, Deepak. Hey, Deepak, can you guys get, I don't know, you can't hear me very well. But in terms of our sponsors, Deepak and Neera Raj have been incredible. Narendra Malani, who's right here, Narendra Nita Malani has been an incredible supporter of Impact. Raj and Kamla Gupta have been incredible supporters of Impact. Please give them a round of applause. And Hemant and Indrani Goradia, also in our founder circle as well. Raj, please, just please everyone give them a round of applause. And then our corporate sponsors are MasterCard, Comcast, the Gates, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, as well as Left Hook and Emily's List. So thank you all for your support. We'll see you back here at lunch. Please let us know if you have any questions about the panels. Our staff is out here, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.
All right, I know some of y'all are grabbing lunch, catching up with friends, I hope making new friends. Welcome back. I'm Sarah Shaw, the Director of Community Engagement with Indian American Impact Project. You've probably got a lot of emails from me, and don't worry, you will continue to get them with lots of calls to action after you leave inspired today. But really excited about our lunch program. We've got some phenomenal speakers and a panel, so we're gonna kick things off. This first person needs no introduction, but we're gonna try to do it justice anyway. But Richa Moorjani was born and raised in the Bay Area, California. You probably know her because she made her series lead debut in Mindy Kaling's Netflix dramedy, Never Have I Ever. After its premiere in 2020, the show immediately hit #1 around the world in the Netflix top 10. Raise your hand if you have seen this show. All right, see, Richard, you have lots of fans. And it's been the Netflix top 10, numerous awards, People's Choice Award, beating out somewhere between 15,000 applicants from a global casting call for the 3 South Asian leads. Richa won the hearts of an international and intergenerational audience with her portrayal of the brilliant, beautiful, and stereotype-subverting Kamala. For the last 2 years in a row, Goldhouse has included Richa in their A100 list of Asian Americans who had the most impact on culture and society. Richa just finished moderating a fantastic panel on the climate change crisis, so she is also dedicated to advancing progressive causes. So give it up, Richa Moorjani.
Thank you so much. Hi everyone, how are you? Can you hear me? Okay, great. I hope you guys are all enjoying your lunch. How's lunch? Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here today, and thank you to Impact for having me here. I think what Impact is doing is just absolutely unprecedented and incredible and so important, bringing together so many incredibly forward-thinking and trailblazing people, South Asian people in one summit and one gathering, and all of you guys can network and create change together and inspire other people and take what you learned today all over to wherever you live in this country and take action. I just think it's so wonderful. So let's give a round of applause to Impact. So I know a lot of you maybe have been hoping to hear from a very brilliant woman who lives in DC named Kamala today. But I hope you'll just settle for someone who plays a brilliant woman named Kamala on TV. Not the same thing, I know. So initially, when Neil Makija over here asked me to speak here today in front of all of you, I was about to say no. I was immediately hit with a wave of anxiety and symptoms of a phenomenon I think a lot of you may be familiar with, and I'm talking about imposter syndrome. Years and generations of conditioning and subtle messaging from society and a system that wasn't designed for all of us have resulted in many of us feeling like we don't belong and we don't deserve to be where we are. But being here today in front of all of you, each and every one of you South Asian trailblazers and leaders, I am reminded of why it is so important and wonderful to honor everything that we are and to celebrate everything we have collectively accomplished together. Celebrating both our own and each other's successes is so essential to fighting back against this harmful and unnecessary syndrome that has been inflicted on us. I am filled with so much pride to see my fellow South Asians here doing such extraordinary and important work. It makes me think about how far we've come, but it also reminds me of times where the landscape was slightly different. When I was growing up in this country, and I'm sure the same thing goes for many of you, and even in the more beginning stages of being an actor, South Asian representation in Western media was virtually non-existent. And the little of it that there was often leaned into one-dimensional character tropes and dangerous stereotypes that made so many of us feel dehumanized and unseen. I would have never dreamed that one day there would be American shows and movies with complex and nuanced South Asian characters, or that our existence would be so normalized in spaces like Hollywood and politics. I'm beyond grateful to be part of a series that has been groundbreaking in so many ways, and I've seen firsthand the impact that it's had on South Asian, young South Asian, older South Asians, people in this room who have expressed how it's given them a sense of belonging that they so desperately craved. It truly brings me chills when I think about the progress that we've made and the opportunities that we've seized and created for ourselves, but there is still so much work to be done. Representation is so important, but not only in Hollywood. It's imperative in every field, especially where individuals have the power to influence, inspire, and create change, whether that be in media, politics, STEM fields, advocacy, the list goes on. It is vital that we see ourselves reflected in all these arenas, not only for us to see what we can aspire to and what we can actually achieve, but even more importantly, for what it shapes how the rest of the world sees us. It directly impacts how we are perceived and treated in everyday life, how we are employed, and how we are included or not included in the conversation. The increase that we've been witnessing in positive representation is undoubtedly thrilling and long overdue. And we are living in such an exciting and crucial time where we as a community are finally reaching the spaces that we deserve to be, including the second highest office in the land, another Kamala reference. This is in large part thanks to our parents and our ancestors and others who came before us to lay down the groundwork. Our growing presence in this country and in every industry also serves as an opportunity to use our voices and platforms to advocate for causes that we care about and that are important to us. I strongly believe that with visibility and influence comes moral and social responsibility. I'm grateful to have the privilege to be able to use whatever platform I have gained through my work as an actor to be an outspoken advocate for my community, but also for other issues that I strongly care about, including mental health, climate justice, and animal rights. As she mentioned, I just had the incredible honor of moderating a panel of some very prolific South Asian changemakers in the environmental space. Some of them, if you're here, raise your hand. Oh my gosh, they didn't make it to lunch. How sad. Well, we're thinking of you. I am filled with so much hope after speaking with them and hearing about the efforts that they are taking towards combating the climate crisis. If there is one message that I have for all of you, it is that every voice matters. Each and every one of us has the distinct power to improve the quality of not just our lives, but of future generations through our work and lifestyle choices. I've personally witnessed how seemingly small individual actions have a ripple effect. I receive messages almost on a daily basis from people who tell me that through my work they feel inspired and emboldened to take certain actions in their own lives, whether that's to become an actor or pursue a career in the arts, or to adopt a plant-based lifestyle to reduce their own impact on animals and the planet. When I hear and see messages like these, any feelings I have of imposter syndrome are promptly replaced with me feeling like my voice and actions actually make a tangible difference. And that can happen for anyone, not just an actor or somebody with any kind of following. It is easy for so many of us to feel overwhelmed or disconnected or completely disengaged from issues that seem larger than ourselves or unrelated to ourselves, especially when we have personally felt marginalized and invisible in so many ways. But I think it is so important to remember that we are all part of a large ecosystem where our interconnectedness and our interdependency with each other and all living beings is undeniable, as we've all seen, especially during this pandemic. And as we, as South Asians, and other people in this room have incredible power to create systemic change when we act together. But that starts at the individual level. I believe that the part of the process of feeling seen and feeling empowered is by actively creating space for and empowering others from our community, especially those with less privilege from ourselves. We, as one of the highest earning and fastest growing minority groups here in the US, have so much more influence than we often think, and our words, decisions, and votes matter. I'd love to leave you all with one of my favorite quotes by Arundhati Roy in honor of today's theme, Dream with Ambition. The only dream worth having is to dream that you will live while you are alive and die only when you are dead. To love, to be loved, to never forget your own insignificance, to never get used to the unspeakable violence and vulgar disparity of the life around you, to seek joy in the saddest places, to pursue beauty to its lair, to never simplify what is complicated or complicate what is simple, to respect strength, never power, above all, to watch, to try and understand, to never look away, and never, never to forget. Thank you. She has a lot of really good quotes. If you ever want to write a speech and need a good quote, just look up Arundhati Roy quotes. Thank you all so much for being here and for showing up to learn from each other and celebrate each other and work together. Thank you again to Indian American Impact Project for having me here. It's such an honor. I hope to meet more of you guys today and at the gala and hear more about the work you're doing.
All right, how about one more round of applause for Richa Murjani? Richa, we've only met recently, but we hope you know you spoke about imposter syndrome that with Impact Project, you are always in the company of friends who look up to you and admire you for everything you are doing for the community. So thank you. Next, I'm excited to introduce Minnie Timaraju, who will be joining us virtually. If we can start queuing her up. Minnie is a founding board member of the Impact Project and the president of NARAL, Pro-Choice America. So we are thrilled to hear from her, given what is happening in the world. There we go, Minnie. Minnie is a seasoned campaigner, skilled coalition builder. Neil says an excellent mom with the cutest boys, high impact organizer, and talented leader with over 20 years of experience leading federal, state, and local campaigns. Previously, she served as a senior advisor to the director of the Office of Personnel Management in the Biden-Harris administration, and prior as Hillary for America's National Women's Vote Director. She has a long-standing commitment to the fight for access to the full range of reproductive health care, and we could not be more honored to have her join us today and let us know how we can heed the call of action. Give it up for Minnie.
Hi, everyone. I'm so bummed not to be with you in person. What a terrible time to be struck with COVID-19. So that's why I'm not there. My family and I are recovering. But I'm Minnie Timaraju, president of NARAL Pro-Choice America, proud Impact member, and a former founding board member. So I'm really grateful to be with you today, and happy AAPI Heritage Month. As I said, my family's in recovery, but we're hanging in there. So keep masking and get your booster shots. It's really important. But thank you to Neil and the entire team for asking me to come to join you and share a bit about the moment we're in and the work I'm leading at NARAL. I think it's important to begin with an honest conversation about where the state of reproductive freedom in our country stands. It's no understatement to say that we are facing a moment of absolute crisis. The leaked Supreme Court's draft majority opinion in the Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization case, which is just a few short weeks ago, I mean, maybe not even a full 2 weeks ago, it feels like a lifetime, has made clear that the Supreme Court is poised to uphold Mississippi's 15-week abortion ban in a case that directly challenges Roe v. Wade. And if the court upholds this cruel ban, it will end Roe and the constitutional right to abortion as we know it. If that happens, 28 states across the country are likely to take action to ban abortion outright. Of those, 13 states already have trigger bans in place, which would ban abortion automatically. The end of Roe v. Wade appears to be on the horizon, but we don't need to wait to see how the court decides this case. Draconian abortion bans are already cutting off access to abortion care in communities across the country. In some states, including my home state of Texas, extreme bans on abortion have pushed care almost entirely out of reach. And at the core of these attacks on abortion is the same sinister agenda that has powered the anti-choice movement and the radical right for decades, maintaining white patriarchal power no matter the cost. And those marginalized at every turn by our systems and institutions, communities of color and immigrant communities like ours today gathered in this room, members of the LGBTQ plus community, people with disabilities, we're bearing the brunt of these attacks. And we don't have to look far to see how these restrictions on our fundamental freedoms harm South Asian Americans and South Asians worldwide in particular. Take, for example, the high-profile case of Purvi Patel, who was prosecuted in Indiana for an alleged abortion. Her pregnancy outcome was criminalized, and it should never have been. Or Savita Halpinavar, the 31-year-old dentist who died from sepsis in Ireland after her request for an abortion was denied. The public outrage from her case changed Ireland's laws and profoundly changed the debate across the world about access to abortion. This month, our partners at the National Asian Pacific American Women's Forum are appealing to organizations, community members, and allies to sign a letter of solidarity in support of reproductive freedom for the AAPI community from the AAPI community, and I encourage every one of you to join them. I'll be frank with you, the stakes are higher than ever, but I know that no matter what the future brings, we're all in this together, and we are far from alone. The vast majority of Americans are with us, 8 out of 10, including the vast majority of Indian Americans and South Asian Americans. And we are mobilizing across the nation to make clear that we are ready to take on the fight for our fundamental freedoms to every corner of this country. Together, we are building a future where all of us, no matter who we are, where we live, or what we believe, has the freedom to make our own decisions about whether to start or grow our families. The road ahead may be daunting, but with you by our side, I know that we can and we will meet this moment. Thank you for all you do. I'm looking forward to our continued work together with impact. Thanks so much for having me today, and I'm so sorry again to miss you.
Minnie, if you're still there, we're incredibly grateful you took the time with COVID to still join us virtually and hope you have a smooth recovery. Next, I am so excited to introduce our fantastic moderator, who will then introduce some more incredible women trailblazers. So, Keisha Ram Hinsdale is the state senator representing Chittenden in Vermont, a role she has been in since her election in 2020. She has many firsts, including being the first woman of color to be elected to the Vermont State Senate. She first ran for office, yeah, big deal, give it up. She first ran for office in 2008 when she ran and won her election for state representative, becoming the youngest legislator in the country. She currently works to build social equity and inclusion in nonprofit organizations, businesses, school districts, and municipalities. She served in the House of Representatives from 2008 to 2016, where she sat on the House General, Housing and Military Affairs, and Ways and Means Committees, and as Vice Chair of the House Natural Resources and Energy Committee. She has also served as co-chair of the Vermont Attorney General's Immigration Task Force, and as a member of the boards of Emerge Vermont, the Main Street Alliance of Vermont, Planned Parenthood of Northern New England. This list goes on, so clearly she knows what she is talking about. Keisha Ram, please join us, Senator, in welcoming the rest of our panel's distinguished guests.
Thank you, Sarah. So you heard a list of accomplishments, but one thing I can't promise to do is get us back on track time-wise, but I will do my best. I'm going to look over to Sarah to sort of help me know when we should try and wrap up and let you go to the next panels. But this has been a wonderful lunch, a wonderful day so far. I'm honored to be with you, and I can't say that I would know exactly how Minnie would have done this. I'm asking myself that now. But taking her place in moderating, I think what I will do is call each amazing woman we have in this next panel up one by one to take a seat while I read their biographies. And a lot of what Minnie said, she was giving you the real truth here, is daunting, but I think you'll find that each one of these women will help lift your spirits back up and know that we are in this fight together and we are going to win it. First, I'd like to call up Dr. Sadaf Jaffer. Dr. Jaffer is an assemblywoman representing New Jersey's 16th legislative district. As assemblywoman, Sadaf uses her local expertise to work to amplify the voices of LD16 residents, especially underrepresented communities. Sadaf is the first Asian American woman and the first Muslim American to be sworn into the New Jersey General Assembly. She is the former mayor of Montgomery Township and currently teaches at Princeton University. She and her husband, Dan, a professor at Princeton, are raising their daughter in Montgomery Township. Next, I'd like to call to the stage Opal Vadan. Opal served as the executive assistant and trip director to Secretary Hillary Rodham Clinton. During her time there, she was also a book collaborator on the Book of Gutsy Women. Prior to that, she was on the National Advance Team for Hillary for America. During the pandemic, she volunteered with World Central Kitchen, a food relief organization. Opal graduated from Pace University in 2015 and was named Pace University's 30 Under 30. She is also a two-time New York Woman in Communications Leadership Scholarship winner, a former campus editor-at-large for Huffington Post, a former on-camera TV reporter for TV Asia, one of our favorites. Opal spent her 2014 semester interning at the White House in the Office of Communications, and she is back there as the personal aide to the Vice President of the United States. Next, we have Rohini Kasolu. Rohini currently serves as Domestic Policy Advisor to Vice President Kamala Harris, after previously serving on the Biden-Harris transition team and as a senior advisor on the Biden-Harris campaign. Before that, she was a Spring 2020 resident fellow at the Institute of Politics at the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University. Kasolu has a dedicated career in public service and was the first South Asian American woman to serve as Chief of Staff in the U.S. Senate. She served as Vice President-elect Harris's Chief of Staff for her Senate office and later her presidential campaign. Before that, she was Policy Director for U.S. Senator Michael Bennet of Colorado, where she oversaw economic, healthcare, and budget issues. She has done so many amazing things, and I am going to go to our last speaker. Everyone has an amazing biography. Rohini. Our last panelist feels like she needs hardly any introduction. She has been a trailblazer and not just created a trail, but turned around and laid down tracks so other people could come blazing down the path after her. Neera Tanden, White House Staff Secretary and Senior Advisor. Is Neera here? Is she? Oh, great. Okay, I was like, oh my God, I'm so worried. Neera Tanden is the staff secretary and a senior advisor to the president. Prior to her current role in the Biden-Harris administration, she was the president and CEO of the Center for American Progress and the CEO of the Center for American Progress Action Fund. Tanden has also served in both the Obama and Clinton administrations, as well as on presidential campaigns. She previously served as a senior advisor for health reform at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. In that role, she developed policies around reform and worked with Congress and stakeholders on particular provisions of President Barack Obama's signature legislative achievement, the Affordable Care Act. And again, I could go on, but let us get to hearing from these amazing women. Oh, it's on. Okay, it's already on. I promise I'm a state senator. So the first question that I have is a bit of a Genesis story question. You know, all of you have really celebrated careers in public service. And, you know, I can't help but think of when I won my first election at 22 and I called my Dottie G and I said, Dottie G, I'm the youngest legislator in the country and she said, "Oh, you were always so good at singing. Could you do that instead?" And so, you know, in addition to just telling us what sparked your career in public service, as a South Asian woman, you know, were there moments where you felt like you were battling your family or your culture to really take that risk and jump into public service? Neera, I wonder if we could start with you. You just nodding your head.
Sure, thank you. And it's a great honor to be with such an amazing panel and so many leaders from this room. And I just really want to say thank you to Impact. I have been working in public policy for 20 years. I hate to date myself, but it is actually 2 decades. And I started in Washington in the 90s, and there were very few organizations for Asian Americans and none for Indian Americans. And I really feel how vital it is for our community to have a voice in the debates. And I just want to say hats off to Impact. So I'll answer the question, I will, but I just really want to say thank you. And I thank you for all that you're doing. Everyone here is engaging in the debates for our country, but I know you do more when you're not here. So thank you for that as well. So I have a story right on this topic, which is when I've been in public policy, as I said. I started in the Clinton administration. I worked for First Lady Hillary Clinton and was dual-hatted to the Domestic Policy Council in the late 1990s. And when I was there, you have on this panel 3 Indian American women working in the White House right now. And there are more Indian Americans working there. I think I was the only one working in the late 1990s, or one of really a handful working in the administration. And so we've made a lot of progress. But I also think there were so few of us back then because as more recent immigrants than others, a lot of our families had pushed us to be doctors or engineers or others, and public policy was a new arena. And so I experienced that very sort of firsthand. So I worked, as I said, for Hillary Clinton, and I actually was getting married, and Hillary very nicely threw me a wedding shower. Which was lovely, you know, really amazing to have a wedding shower. So I invited my family to come and my friends and people in my wedding party. And my mother had met Hillary before, but this was her second meeting with Hillary. And so I bring my mom over to meet Hillary, and Hillary's like, "So great to see you again. You must be so incredibly proud of your daughter. She's making such a great contribution." And my mom says to her, "Her friends in law school are making a lot more money." I mean, like, word by word. And you know, I'm experiencing this like slow motion train wreck. And just like my fiance, now husband, is there, and we're all looking. And then Hillary feels like defensive about this, right? So she says, "No, but Neera is making laws. You know, people in law firms are working on what the law is. Neera is helping make laws," which was a little overstated for the moment, but, you know, I really appreciated it. And then my mom says, "But some of her friends are making partner." At which point, my husband like jammed in a drink, but it was a bit like Hillary took in stride. It was all good. I will say that a few months later, Hillary ran for Senate and asked me to go to the campaign, and then I got a big raise moving on to the campaign, and she called me and said, "You need to tell your mom that you did get a raise," and I said, "Sure." So I would say sorry, I apologize for the long story, but it is a case where I think, you know, being in public policy was like a new experience for my mom, and really wasn't in the path that she was thinking for me. I do think she is proud of me now, but it was back then, and even now, I think it is sometimes harder for immigrants who struggled a lot to be successful here, to see public policy and sometimes the ugliness of politics as an arena that makes sense. And so I appreciate all of us pushing into new directions and ensuring that our community is represented, because I also know from the last 20 or so years that who is here in Washington and whose voices are represented matters fundamentally to what happens in laws, in debates, and really what happens overall to the trajectory of our community.
Thanks, Neera. We truly can never win. Rohini, let's go to you.
Thanks. And just to echo Neera's thank you to everyone. And there's so many leaders in the room looking around, and so many of us have worked together for years. But I think to echo the point that I think for all of us when we started, for me it was about almost 15 years ago, and I started out in the Senate, there, you know, I couldn't find people that looked like me walking up and down the hallway. But the number one question that I often get asked by young people, to your earlier point, is, yeah, how do I deal with my parents if I want to do this line of work? And the thing I try and always emphasize with them is that, you know, if you take someone, many of us up here, I can guarantee to tell you that our parents still complain. So it doesn't actually matter what you end up doing, because like they'll still have thoughts. Even if you have the kids, you get married, get the fancy job, they will still complain about something. So when you realize that end point, you just actually start to realize, okay, this is a path I should go on because this is something I want to do, not because it's going to please any specific person. And I think to Neera's point earlier, you know, it's a path that many immigrants don't know how it's going to work out. I mean, if you look at a lot of what people's parents are pushing them to do, it's something with some more career stability. It's like you work this many tracks to become a partner, you do this many things to become a doctor. And it's a lot more anxious and unknown for them, and for all the reasons that they came to America, for so many reasons. And that anxiety is what, you know, is leading a lot of the same questions and probing. And so it's not easy necessarily to, you know, try and figure out, you know, a way to tell them, yes, I'm joining a campaign, but we have no idea we could also lose, and then we all lose our jobs at the end. That doesn't feel good to, you know, have to explain that part. And the world that we live in, you know, as we're seeing now, it's hyper polarized in terms of the different attacks. But I think the most important thing, you know, that you know, you hit upon in your question is, you know, what is driving behind the force of, you know, making the decision to go into in public service, and the idea that you can shape different concepts or laws, or that you can bring your lived experience to a room and actually make a difference, you know, is really what I think inspires so many people in this room to keep doing what they're doing. So that would be my sort of sense of encouraging words for people. Just know that your parents are still going to complain, but, you know, but at the end of the day, I think carving out a path in which, you know, you've made all your own decisions is also equally as gratifying too.
So true. Thank you. Assemblywoman.
Sure. So, you know, I think people from our communities are very successful in lots of different fields, but haven't been going into politics as frequently. And so, as others have said, it's a new path, it's something different. But one of the things that I say to South Asian communities is that democracy is a very valuable thing. It's priceless. And our countries back home have an anti-colonial history. People have fought and died for democracy back home and here. And so if we value that democracy, we have to participate in that democracy. And that starts with voting in every election, that starts with running for office. So I think what motivated me was seeing that some of my elected officials did not reflect my values, did not reflect what I thought was my best interest. And so I started thinking that there had to be people from my background with those values in office. And if I wanted other people to run, then I should run myself. I think that in terms of responses from family or from community, you know, I first ran for office in 2016. And I remember, you know, members of my family saying, not that they didn't respect what I was doing, but saying, you know, is this the time for maybe people like us to lie low and to not bring attention to ourselves? And I think that they anticipated maybe some of the hate speech and reactions that I might get. But what I said was, you know, if we don't get involved now, who knows if we even will have those rights. We have to get involved now. And then since I've been elected, it's been so heartening to see the support from communities. I think, you know, there can be traditional gender roles. I think all of the women up here and many women in the audience have probably fought back against patriarchy and gender roles. And I think I did that when I was younger. But I've been really heartened to see South Asian communities, Muslim communities welcome me with open arms, want me to speak, want me to introduce me to their daughters. To me, that shows that our communities know how important this is, and it's just very difficult when you haven't had that ladder, you haven't had people to look up to. Now we're seeing more and more of that, so happy to see everyone in the room today and hope to continue this trajectory of many more women from our communities in office and in other roles in government.
Absolutely, thanks for being a part of that. Yeah. And Opal.
Well, once again, I want to echo just a huge thank you to Neil and Deepak for an incredible summit. And I remember growing up in this country and remembering I don't see anyone who looks like me on TV or representing my values. And so as I got older and got an internship in the Obama White House, I realized I could be part of this change. And for my family, it was really hard because I wasn't the doctor, I wasn't the engineer. And even working for Secretary Clinton, same thing, kind of like Neera, my mom would be like, tell Hillary to find you a husband. I don't understand. You guys travel all over the world, tell Hillary to find you a husband. And it became a running joke where Secretary Clinton would call my mom and be like, don't worry, I'm on the lookout, but let your daughter do her job. And even now working for the Vice President, Kamala Harris, too, it's, you know, we'll travel all around the world with her. We'll have incredibly bilateral meetings, and the Vice President really represents our country. We were just in Abu Dhabi oh my gosh, we landed yesterday. And still my mom's like, have you met anyone yet? We have a marriage proposal for you. Are you sure you don't want to leave your job? So it's one of those things growing up. We didn't have organizations like this, right? You couldn't see that you could be, you know, like Neera and Rohini and the assembly member. So what really motivates me to continue to do my job is all the other, you know, little brown girls and boys in this country, right? Going to school, and they can look at people who I'm on this panel with. They can look at everyone in this room knowing that they can grow up and be anything and do anything. And that's why I do my job every day, because I get to work for the first, you know, Black and South Asian woman of color vice president. And I think about, you know, getting made fun of for my name being Opal Vidhan and having oil in my hair and not looking like everyone else. And now if kids, you know, are going to get made fun of that, they have to respect the vice president. She is the most powerful woman in this country. And that kind of is what motivates me. Though, you know, our families still have the questions, why aren't you married yet? Are you sure you don't want to leave your job? We'll find a nice marriage proposal for you. But we all have to continue to do this work. And once again, so grateful to be on this panel with incredible South Asian women and to be here with all of you.
The vice president is lucky to have you, and I'm worried you're going to get some marriage proposals after this as well. So, you know, we've heard some pretty bad news today from Minnie, and we know we're here in the seat of power where we know there's huge struggles going on and around the country, you know, mass shootings and just a lot of despair. Some recent good news was the elevation of Ketanji Brown Jackson to the Supreme Court, the first time a Black woman has sat on the highest court in the land. And I was really struck during her confirmation hearing when Senator Cory Booker, you know, really heralded her as a great American. And it made me realize, you know, as a woman of color, South Asian woman with a funny name, how little we get called great Americans and get lifted up in this country. And so, you know, I was just wondering, I wrote an article for every Ketanji Brown Jackson, be a Cory Booker. Have you had a Cory Booker? Have you ever stopped and felt like, you know what, I am seen as an American and as someone who's giving back to this country? And how do you try to do that for others as well? And I'll just start with whoever wants to jump in, and then we'll kind of go back in a circle.
I can start. So when I won my election to local government, and I was the first South Asian woman, first South Asian member of that local government in my township, and my opponents put a post saying, oh, we lost the election. And the first comment was, I was born in this country and some Indian's gonna tell me what to do? You can't fix stupid. This was my welcome to elected office. And actually, my husband, he's not very active on Facebook, but he put his picture up. He usually had like some random thing. He put his picture up and he responded and he said, she was born in this country too. She's an American. And, and I feel like those of us who are in politics, we know the pressures our spouses feel. Because I think it's so hard to see someone you love being attacked. And so I appreciated that moment that he stepped up for me. And then I would say that it's just every time that I speak, especially to community groups, I remember going to a seniors lunch and I sat down and this woman was so excited because she had never met a woman mayor. She was an older white American woman, and she was just like holding my hand. She's like, oh, you're the mayor of the town? A woman mayor? Like, she was so excited. And to her, it wasn't even about my race or my ethnic background. It was just a proud moment for her as a woman to know that there was a woman in leadership. So I think there are those moments when we have those groups of solidarity that really shows us that it's not just, it is important, that we speak to our racial and ethnic communities, but also to have solidarities as people of color, as women, as, whatever our agendas are, as people who are activists for healthcare or for the environment, that those are the different moments when we can embrace all those elements of our identities and also what we're passionate about.
So, yeah, I would love to just build on that. It's, I think that the debates about politics have really become, incredibly ugly over the last several years. And I don't think, I think engaging in the debate is so vital because in some ways it's more contested than ever. As I've said, I worked in the Clinton administration, I worked in the Obama administration, and I would say that for the first time, in 2016 was the first year that in social media posts or elsewhere, I saw, directed hatred towards myself as an Indian American. Like I received posts, I'm a little out there online sometimes, but I would get posts back of like go back to India and really derogatory posts from white nationalists, like vitriolic assaults that really separated, really tried to separate me from being an American. And I think it's, we shouldn't ignore the hatred that exists in the country that we just saw materialize itself in Buffalo, and that what is really at stake in a lot of our debates, and I've talked about this before, is a question of really who is American, and whether immigrants like us are truly American. And it really struck me in 2016 that there are groups of people in the country who do not believe that I, a person who was born here, but wouldn't matter if I was an immigrant or not, but I was born here, I was not truly American. And I think that is a product of the divisive politics we have seen over the last several years. An ugly politics that pits other Americans against immigrants, against people of color, against people with accents, against people who wear different kinds of clothes, to say that America is only for some and not for all of us. And that is why I think it is really vital that our community steps up and proudly demonstrates every day that we are American, deserve a voice here, and are proud of engaging in policy and politics. Because it is not, it is a contest. I do think we should just be frank that there are more and more voices in our politics, some winning elections in places all around the country, who think that the country is only for groups that don't look like us, not for groups that do. So, thank you. I hope that's another motivation for all of us to be engaged.
Yeah, I mean, Opal and I are very blessed in terms of working for Vice President Kamala Harris. You know, when I started with her, it was her first days as a United States Senator. And I had left her, I had interviewed with her while I was simultaneously interviewing, I'm not sure if she's aware, but for the private sector as well. And what I was, you know, really intrigued by is that here's this South Asian woman that, you know, is trying to also navigate being the first of her kind to do this in the Senate. And so for me, it was like this kind of social experiment in the Senate because all you're used to is, you know, predominantly white senators walking around. And, you know, we knew that it had to be successful, right? Because she had so many people that were going to, you know, hope to come after her. And so that was my first experience. But what was interesting was, you know, I had been with 2 senators before, and one when he was starting up, Michael Bennet. And the difference I saw when senators were meeting her versus him, you know, just how do you say your name? And, you know, and they would, you know, the way that they would approach her, almost like she was an exotic animal walking around, and try and make her feel a little bit smaller. And the things that I saw all the time, she would show up, you know, her shoulders back and would just own her space. And I think for so many of us watching that day in and day out, I've seen her, you know, when, you know, on TV people have seen hearings, but also behind closed doors, she's the same person. So, you know, when Trump administration officials would come in, and she would have done all this homework in terms of, you know, asking them what, you know, the rationales that led to the Muslim ban. And, you know, really probing in front of her other senators that were just, you know, can't we all get along? And being able to watch her in those spaces, you know, take her space and, you know, show up every day, knowing that there were people seeking to make her space smaller. I think that was so compelling for me to, you know, decide that this is a person I'm going to work for a long time, but also that, you know, the other staff, particularly when I became her Senate Chief of Staff, one of the biggest things that we were able to accomplish together was, you know, we ended up winning the award for one of the most diverse Senate offices. We were able to get to 70% people of color, majority women. Thank you. And what's, you know, and we had people come up to us in the office often and say, this is the first time I've been able to work somewhere where I can be my full self. And it means they didn't have to filter what they were saying. They could just speak as who they are. And it ranged from all different ethnicities and races. And what you see over time, though, the impact of that, of somebody that shows up. So when people are often, she gets asked, you know, what is it like to be the first, you know, et cetera. And for her, she's been doing this for a long time, being the first. But for all of us that, you know, work with her and see her often, the daily thing, day in and day out, because it's not like when, particularly when we were in the general election, and the Republicans, you know, were like, look at her name, look at this, and look at her background, she's not American, you know, all the same things that they did to President Obama. It's not like those things don't affect people over time. It's just that, you know, holding that role of responsibility at these levels and having to put on a face every day and also own the space because you know that all the people are looking up to you to own that space. So for us, I think so many of us up here that work in the White House and others that get to have met with her, I think that, you know, for us is very inspiring every day.
Yeah. And that sounds like a really well-run office too.
but she will always ensure when we have these meetings in her office that no one is left out at the table, that especially for young people in this room, find people who will lift you up and that your voice matters. Growing up, I always say this, right? I didn't see people who looked like me. And so now, especially at the White House, I see Neera, I see Rohini, and we have such a large contingent of South Asian people that, like the Vice President says, you know, she may be the first, but she won't be the last. It's kind of up to us and everyone in this room to be those Cory Bookers for other people, other young people, to make sure we are opening up the spaces, giving people a seat at the table. And I just can't emphasize enough of how important it is to continue to do that.
Absolutely. I'm looking at Sarah, who's helping us keep time. We are Indians. This is hard for us. Is there like closing statements? Do we have time for?
Do one more question or
Okay, great. I know we wish we had all the time in the world. This has been amazing. The theme of today is Dream with Ambition, right? And I think we all probably look at that and have very strong feelings about when we've been told we're dreaming too big, too ambitious. Vice President Harris herself was told you should be more humble, and I'm sure we all had a strong reaction to that. Yeah, just closing remarks on dreaming and being ambitious and what that's meant to you and what that can mean to especially young women in the audience.
So I'll start. I do think that there's perceptions of what women are like, and Indian women, and South Asian women, and Asian women, and so I think the question of ambition, I mean, we dream with ambition, but the term ambitious has had a positive connotation when applied to men, and perhaps less of a positive connotation when applied to women and Asian women and women of color. So I will close with another story, which is when I was Hillary's LD, again, now we're in the early 2000s, legislative director when she was in the Senate. She did this floor speech, and it was really well received. The press was really great. There was immediate positive reaction from her colleagues, and we were walking back from the Senate floor, and she asked me who was in charge of the speech. And I said, and I will say, I said this because I sort of thought, you know, maybe it was the way I was brought up or gender messages, but my thought was to give everyone else on my team, the kudos. So I said it was a team effort and she was like, well, who on the team? And I said, well, the speechwriters and some of the ledge staff. And she was like, but whose idea was it? And I said, it was a team effort. And she stopped in the hallway and looked at me and said, Neera, do you think male staffers would say it was a team effort, or would they say it was their idea? I was like, when you put it that way. And she said, you have to own your success. And I have to say, for me, now, I'm not really known as a meek person. I think that's fair. But even for me, in my early 30s, my first instinct was it's obnoxious to take credit. I think the social cues, and I think I think it's a genuine thing to struggle with. A lot of the social cues are, it's obnoxious when women go out there and take credit for things. And it's just not seen as obnoxious when men do the same thing. And I think, we see this in surveys of business places and elsewhere. And so I think this is just an important thing for all of us to remember. We are all leaders in this room. I'm a leader, we're all leaders. And it's really to encourage women to take credit, to own their success, and to applaud them for it. Because I do think that is something we all have struggled with. And when it exists and holds us back, it is something that's a challenge for all of us.
I think, when people are talking about, dreaming with ambition, that one of the things we have to just keep in mind is that so many of us are sitting up here, and you'll be, so many of you will sit on different panels and things like that, carving out paths that no one's ever done. And that is really what it's all about, because at the end of the day, the path that, when you look back at your career, even thus far, for every one of you sitting around, no one could have properly predicted where exactly you would be and what exactly you'd be doing or thinking about doing. Because for so many of us sitting around, we've not had people that have done this before. And what you get used to over time, which is a double-edged sword, is knowing that you have to keep going to carve out something in the future, knowing that there's a very high chance no one has ever done what you've done. And so we have to, I think, to the original point of why this room is here and this space is here, is because we have to hold hands doing this, and knowing that there's people in this room that are really pushing for you to do that. I myself, I remember doing basically my dad called and was like, I have a friend, his daughter is 13 and she does a podcast. And I was like, I would never do this podcast if it wasn't for the fact that you were friends with this person. So I have to end up on this podcast with a 13-year-old lovely girl, Indian girl with braces, just full of life. And she's doing this podcast on women that, inspire her. And it was the first time I heard a young person read the same biography that I sit on. And, if I go to a conference, people read the bio. And it's the first time I had heard a very young girl read my own biography back to me. And I was sitting there thinking, I've done a lot, actually. like 13-year-old me would be very proud of myself. As somebody whose parents used to cut out clips of people doing things in India abroad and then leave it on my bed and be like, this person achieved residency at 19 years old. I was like, I'm awesome. And we don't get enough of, I am awesome. I know. So I encourage all of you guys, you don't have to find a young person to read out your bio to you, but to keep in mind that, there's just not, it's not a big thing in our culture to really take credit or to think, I am doing awesome. But, even if it's not all figured out, just know at some point that, it will all fall into place. And again, I go back to the fact that rooms like this are so inspiring because you're looking around at a bunch of people that made a bunch of choices to get this far in their career without anyone telling them what to do. And so for that, thank you for having us here.
I feel like this could be called Dream with the Ambition Your Parents Have for You.
So I would say, keep in mind that anything is possible and be creative in your goals. And something that I tell myself often is that politics is an art, not a science. Nobody has it figured out. Otherwise, we wouldn't see upsets. And I'm reminded of when I ran in my town, it was all Republican local government, Republican congressman, Republican governor. And someone asked me, oh, you're just running, you're going to lose, right? And I said, no, I think I can win. And I won, becoming the only Democrat, the first one in several years. Then we took over the majority. I became the mayor. Then we took over our state legislative district, turned an all Republican district to an all Democratic district. If we had just listened to those people who said, this is this way, this district is red, that's just what people want you to believe, that things have to keep going the way they've always gone. But no, aim for that change, and you can see that change. And the thing about politics is, if you have the votes, you win. So no matter what the so-called experts say, no matter what the commentators say, if you have the people on your side, you win. So that's my message.
I just have to say, you have to dream big, right? There will be constantly people who will tell you, you can't do this. It's never been done. You don't look the part. You didn't go to an Ivy League school. You have to continue to dream big and believe in yourself. I talk about so much growing up and not knowing anyone in public service or politics. I didn't have the connection. I didn't have the Ivy League education. And all my friends and classmates were like, maybe you should go a safer path, right? Maybe be a teacher. Maybe, try and just work in retail and you'll figure it out. But you have to believe in yourself, and you have to find people who are willing to help you and lift you up. And for me, you know, Huma Abedin, who is once again a South Asian woman doing incredible things, also has a great book out, Both and, highly recommended. I remember, you know, working for her, and she was always telling me, Opal, you have to continue to push yourself and believe in yourself, because no one else is going to do it for you. So to everyone in this room, I would just say, continue to dream big and you'll find your path. It won't be a linear path. It will be a roller coaster. And then along the way, you'll find incredible women. I get to work with Rohini and Neera every day, who will continue to uplift you, give you seats at the tables, and then you'll have to pay it forward to some other young South Asian women to let them know that they can also do anything and be anything.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. I feel deeply re-energized and inspired. I think others do too. Thank you all as an audience for your patience in letting us go over. And I'll hand this back over to Sarah, who's waiting right there to take it so we can move on. Yeah.
Okay. Let's give one more round of applause for our incredible panel. We are happy to be running on Indian Standard Time for these women. So thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing all of your advice, for everything you're doing, like you said, to ensure that even though you may have been first, you are not the last. We are so incredibly grateful. Transitioning now, so we are going to go into afternoon training sessions, which I am personally the most excited about, in that we're going to take all the things you've been talking about all morning, hearing from policy experts, inspiring women, our congressional members, and translate that into action. So each of these sessions right now are hands-on skills-based trainings. So you have 3 options, and we encourage you in a minute to go to them as quickly as possible. If you are speaking, you should head that way. First, be the change, what to know from when running for office. So if you are even considering running for office, committing to public service, you should go to this session. You'll hear from a very distinguished panel and be able to network. Next, we have Desi's Vote. Desi's Vote is happening in Pierce, which is in the hallway around the corner. This one, we have, I think, a dozen different partners who are all going to share tips for how to mobilize your communities. And we also are launching, in partnership with all of these organizations, a new desisvote.org website, and doing a WhatsApp training where you can send mass WhatsApp messages using this really awesome tool. So check that out. And last but not least, we are launching our Volunteer What's True crew and talking about concrete tactics to combat mis and disinformation, which you've heard a lot about today, you've seen in your own communities. So go to that training to learn how to spot it, how to talk to others about it, and about Impact's efforts. It is 1:10. If you all can plan on going to those rooms, 2 of them are on the 2nd floor. Desi's Vote is around the corner. We'll get started by 1:20. Thanks, y'all.
Hi, everybody. We're about to get started in just a second. Thank you all for coming back. Hope you had a wonderful time in your breakout groups. I saw some really great conversations and excited to hear more as we get a chance in the reception tonight at 6:30. We're going to talk about a really critical issue for so many members of our community now in this final panel. Many of you may not know the stats, but really about 1/3 of Indian Americans were born here, 1/3 are naturalized, and 1/3 are immigrants who have not yet naturalized or are on long-term visas. There's a number of issues that stem from peculiarities of our immigration laws, which really are still remnants of the 1920s, in which South Asians, Indian Americans were completely excluded from immigration to the United States. And we're going to talk about where we are now as a country and where we're going to go forward. You heard some of it from Congressman Krishnamurthy and Ro Khanna this morning, and we're really delighted to bring some incredible leaders and advocates and experts to talk about that right now. So I'm going to introduce our moderator, and she'll bring on the rest of the panel. So Krish Omara Vignaraja is from Maryland. Many of you may know she was a candidate in Maryland and really made a name for herself and was someone that we paid attention to when Impact was first being founded. And she's now the president and CEO of Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Service. She's previously served as the policy director for Michelle Obama in the Obama White House. She served in the Department of State under Secretaries Clinton and Secretary Kerry, working on programs concerning refugees and migration, as well as a number of other issues on U.S. foreign policy. Prior to working in the White House, she worked at Jenner & Block in Washington, D.C. She's a graduate of Yale Law School and was a Marshall Scholar at Oxford University, where she studied international relations. Krish has been recognized as one of the Daily Record's top 50 influential Marylanders, top 100 women, and most admired CEOs, as well as a woman to watch by the Baltimore Sun. Please welcome Krish Omara Vignaraja.
Thanks, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for sticking around. I think this is really going to be such an important discussion around immigration. I want to start by introducing our panelists, because I know you're really here to hear from them. So if you can just, as I announce you, just come up to the stage, that would be great. So Deep Patel is the founder of Improve the Dream, which is a youth-led grassroots organization that supports and advocates for young immigrants who have grown up in the U.S. as child dependents of visa holders, but are facing aging out of the immigration system. Since 2017, through Improve the Dream, Deep has advocated to permanently end aging out for over 200,000 documented dreamers. And then Meghna Damani is an award-winning filmmaker and advocate for H-4 dependent visas. She has focused on producing films that try to explore identity, spirituality, social justice. She really has dedicated her life to advocating for work authorization for dependent spouses with her autobiographical film, Heart Suspended, that really broke the silence on the issue. It was screened at the Indian National TV and also festivals worldwide. And then our last in-person panelist is Brent Renison, who is an immigration attorney with Perilli Renison. He has been an immigration lawyer since 1997. He has received a number of legal awards, including being named by Law and Politics as a super lawyer. He served as an adjunct associate professor at the University of Oregon and has lectured regionally and nationally on immigration law politics. And then our final speaker, who I think you'll see on the screen in a second, is Todd Schultz, who is the president of Forward.us, which is a bipartisan political and policy advocacy organization that's really focused on fixing our broken immigration and criminal justice systems. Prior to this role, he served as chief of staff at Priorities USA Action, which is the super PAC that supported President Obama's reelection, and before that served as chief of staff for Congressman Scott Murphy. All right. And I want to start really with an open question. Obviously, the theme of this discussion today is dream with ambition, which is an optimistic kind of theme, in some ways meeting after the devastating Buffalo shootings, which were in part driven by replacement theory and anti-immigration sentiment. I think it's an important time. Obviously, we're also meeting just after some important primaries. And we know that immigration is going to continue to be a key issue in the midterms. And so I want to ask each of the panelists, if you could sort of describe and maybe share an example of how the American dream has served you, as well as maybe an example in which the dream feels, out of reach or broken. And maybe, Brent, I'll just start with you and go down the line.
Okay. Can you hear me? Yeah. Well, being born in the United States, the American dream has served me quite well. But my paternal ancestors actually came from India 1,000 years ago, the Roma, who were persecuted through Europe. And my family, my great-grandfather came to the United States in 1906. And when he came, there was no green card, there were no quotas. He just came. And then 5 years later, declare his intention to be a U.S. citizen. And then he became a citizen. We have a system now, quotas and racial discrimination, that is shameful. And it's working. It's working better for others, and very badly for some few people, including mostly Indian-born applicants. And so I've worked to try to do some things, and we can talk about some of the things we can all do here. But some of us who have had the opportunity need to step up and help those who are struggling badly now.
Yeah, thank you so much, Brian. That's so important, us helping. So my journey has been a long journey. The community that I work with primarily are families and women on dependent spouse visas. For them, the American dream is pretty elusive. It's kind of like the proverbial, dangling carrot. Like you think you just got it and then it just moves like beyond your reach. So to share, to better understand these communities, I'll share my journey. So I came here in 2002 after getting married to my husband who had a work visa. And at the time I was in India, I was working, I had a, crazy job in advertising. And so when he told me, you won't be able to work, I said, yeah, I'm happy I won't be able to work. But I didn't realize, what a nightmare it was going to be, because for 5 long years I couldn't work, and I spiraled quickly into a depression and still struggle with, chronic anxiety, from that time period, and to the point where I even contemplated suicide, and I had to, go back to India while my husband was here. We were separated, and thankfully I found a spiritual practice me come back, and I met a lot of women like me, and I ended up making a documentary, personal documentary about that, which I used to advocate and bring awareness. And it was really shocking to see how many people were not aware of this at all. And so after that, the good news was that there was change in 2015. About 100,000 dependent spouses were given work authorization, which was unheard of at that time. However, they still face so many challenges. Meanwhile, I did become a citizen. So that was, a happy ending, so to speak, but not really, because I feel really responsible, for all the women I advocate for. And, for them, with the green card backlog and everything, it's not such a rosy picture. And then also with the women who have the EAD, they have so many issues now, where they expire, and then, they have to lose their jobs, for 6 months at a time. And also they struggle, with abuse, with exploitation. And so there's like tremendous work to be done, which I'll go into more detail later. I'll pass it on.
So there's so many different parts of our immigration system that are very broken, but one particular aspect that's affected me and a lot of people in this room is the process of aging out, which affects more than 200,000 children of long-term visa holders. And so what the American dream is really what's driving us to fight for change that we are. There's over 40 people here, members of Improve the Dream and Documented Dreamers, who face aging out, and we're advocating for a pathway to citizenship and a permanent end to aging out, which means that there's a process where children who are brought here legally in the country can be raised and educated here, but still be forced to leave after they turn 21. And that's one of the many broken parts of the system, but it highlights the need to create different reforms so that we can all achieve our American dream.
Wonderful. And then Todd, can I bring you in?
Yeah, and I'll apologize. I know no one's ever heard this before, but my family member tested positive. So if you hear children screaming in the background, that's on your end and not my kids downstairs. So I'm sorry I can't be there today. In terms of the American dream, and I'm sorry I'm getting a little feedback. I don't know if you all are hearing it too. I think it's important to keep in mind that when we talk about what is America, America is lots of things. And we like to think about it as how can America live up to the best of its ideals, and how can we, in the case of our immigration work, how do we build an immigration system that lives up to the best of those ideals, and one that allows people who are here today not just to fight to eventually be able to stay, and not just for people who come in the future to be able to come for some period of time. We should be building a new immigration system entirely, one that's humane and modern and sustainable, that allows people to come and fully contribute right away. And whether that is a mom who is coming to the border because it's the last good chance for her and her kids to seek asylum, or a mom-to-be who's graduating from the University of Missouri, where I'm from, who wants to go on and work as an engineer or work in the transportation sector. We should make it easier for all those people to come. We shouldn't just have this low bar of do people get to stay. We should be clearing the backlog. We should be giving people not just a work permit, but the ability and encouraging and doing everything we can to get people onto a pathway to naturalize here. And that, to me, is ultimately what an immigration system that upholds the best to what the American dream should be about.
Thank you, Todd. And I'll add my own personal story. Obviously, from Neil, you heard that I was in school for a very long time, but on a personal basis, immigration is an important issue to me because my parents fled a civil war in Sri Lanka and came to the US when I was 9 months old. And I know that this story is going to resonate with a lot of people because my parents came. They had no jobs. Just $200. I feel like immigrants always come with $200, but my parents came with $200 and 2 very young kids in their arms. And it was Baltimore that welcomed us. My dad became a Baltimore City public school teacher, taught for 37 years in Baltimore City, finally retired when my daughter was born at the age of 80. He was the oldest public school teacher in the state of Maryland. And it was, Baltimore that welcomed us. And it was that gave us the opportunity to go to schools like, Yale and Oxford and Yale Law. And I know that my daughter, who's now 4, will have a better life because my own parents' lives were hard. And to me, that's the American dream, right? And I think it is such a devastating reality to see immigrants ostracized and the fear-mongering that we see today because they are us. They're just the newest generation or wave of it. And I think for me, what scares me to death is our country has turned our backs on our roots. And it is not just the right thing to do, right? It's a smart thing to do, whether it's for our economic interests or national security or because so many religions are called, to this issue as a matter of faith. And yet it's a polarizing issue. And so that's where I think I'm really grateful for this discussion because you may not have kind of worked on this issue for much of your career. I certainly hadn't. But this is the time for us to lean into it. So I want to talk about a few specific issues. And I want to start with DACA and the Pathway to Citizenship for Children. So this June marks the 10-year anniversary of DACA, or Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. And this is obviously an Obama administration policy that protects undocumented young people known as dreamers who enter the country as children from deportation and kind of provides them with work permits. So I want to start maybe with Brent in terms of what impact has DACA had on immigrant communities and the South Asian immigrant community specifically?
Well, DACA has been vital to the undocumented population, and I think when we're talking about documented and undocumented from the standpoint of somebody who came here as a child, they don't really care. It doesn't matter. I mean, and DACA has made significant shifts in entire populations, giving hope and opportunity to people who have great things to do for the community. I have a dentist now, a dentist client who is from Mexico. There's no way he would have become a dentist if he didn't have DACA. I'm now looking at the 10-year anniversary going, my gosh, I can't remember. I've been renewing these two-year DACAs all this whole time. However, who's left out, oddly, is people who came with a visa and who are not out of status on a certain date. It's long ago now, but you had to show you were out of status, and so they've left out some people. So while it has impacted all manner of people across the spectrum, from the South Asian community to the Hispanic community, it really for the documented dreamers, it's fallen short.
And Deep, I want to bring you into this conversation as well, but I also want to ask you about documented dreamers, because it's estimated that more than 200,000 children of long-term visa holders, mostly of Indian origin, risk facing self-deportation when they turn 21 and age out of their dependent status. So you founded a youth-led organization. It's wonderful to see this group leading the charge on this issue. And I guess I wanted to ask you, can you provide some context of what this issue is, and then maybe share some policy solutions that your group is advocating for?
Yes. So on the first on the issue of DACA, DACA it was a great policy that helped nearly 1 million people access work authorization and protection from deportation. And actually, when it was announced, on the day that I saw, the press releases and on the news, when I saw it, it seemed like it was actually something that would help me as well, because while we grow up on dependent visa statuses, we don't have work authorization. And when it was announced, it seemed like I met all of those qualifications. You had to have been here before, June 15, 2007, been present on the date that DACA was announced in 2012, and I felt I met all of those. But then once the applications rolled around, it required you to also have been undocumented. So that, it didn't make sense to me, and I was confused why that was the case. But at the time, I also didn't know this was something that was affecting hundreds of thousands of others, approximately 250,000. So it's something that was an oversight and something that wasn't prioritized previously, but that also is what inspired me and all of us to be in this movement to bring change to not only DACA or other administrative policies, but hopefully a permanent legislative fix, so no one in the future has to go through this. No child who grows up in the United States should have to face aging out or self-deportation. And our vision from that we had been advocating for years was finally introduced on a bipartisan basis in both the House and the Senate last year. And that's one of the policy solutions, America's Children Act. And what that would do is essentially create a mechanism where if someone's brought here as a child, they've been here for 10 years and complete higher education in the United States, they would be able to get a green card. And I think a lot of people in this room probably might think, well, why wasn't that already the case, right? That's exactly the question I think most of my friends and most Americans probably would say, because they don't realize that that doesn't already exist. And so that's one of the solutions. And also, the bill would have other age out mechanisms that ensure that children don't age out at 21 if they have a pending green card application.
And Deep, I think you raise a really important issue, which is, what is the information that's out there? How are we communicating on these issues? And so, Meghna, I want to bring you in on that. Obviously, as a documentary maker, as an H4 dependent spouse yourself, you have engaged with many of these youth. So could you talk a little bit about kind of your experience on these issues and what you've seen?
Yeah, thank you. So, primarily as a documentary filmmaker, I've been focusing on the women. And recently, while I was filming one of the women, she stepped away and I was talking to her daughter. And that was the first I had, learned about this issue. And her daughter told me that, when I grow up, I want to be a NASA scientist. And I was like, that's so exciting. And she said, you know what, I wrote to the senator, but I'm afraid because after I become 18, I may have to leave. Sorry, once I age out, I'll have to, leave the country. And this is where I grew up, and I've never been to India. I don't know anyone. And I was just so, struck by the fear, the anxiety on her face. And I was thinking to myself, here is this girl, she wants to contribute to this country. She wants to be a scientist. And, we're going to lose her because, of this restriction. And soon after that, I found out about the trauma that, these kids go through. And I heard of one story where, one girl, she was so anxious and frustrated, she was actually punching holes into the wall of her room. And her mom was on a dependent visa but had been laid off because her renewal hadn't come through, so they couldn't even afford a therapist, and they had to pay out of pocket to help their daughter. And so while these kids are also seeing their parents going through all of this, and they themselves are going through all of this, so it's just a lot. And so, when I met Deep and, everyone, all the kids here, I was just so inspired by what they're doing because, this is something that is, extremely urgent for everything that they're going through.
I want to talk about policy and then kind of more about people. So, Todd, I just want to ask you, can you talk a little bit about how people in this room could help advocate, really push Congress in terms of implementing solutions? Deep obviously mentioned bipartisanship, which is refreshing at the moment.
Yeah, I think actually that's a great place to start, which is how does a bill become a law? It's actually a pretty important thing, I think, to remember, which is with notable exceptions, things like what's called the Budget Reconciliation Act. You need to get 218 votes in the House, but you need 60 votes in the United States Senate. And that is inherently a bipartisan enterprise there. It's a huge testament to the work that Deep and so many people in the work have done to see the incredible momentum building around this, as well as the just incredible momentum that we've seen over the last couple of years on a lot of the other issues that we've discussed. I think it is really important, first and foremost, to understand that elected officials are accountable to people that they're hearing from, to their constituents, but they're really responsive to people who they are talking to at that moment. They are human beings, and when they sit down and they hear a pretty basic ask, and they understand here's a problem, and here's what a solution is. We want the DREAM Act to be amended to include folks who would otherwise be aging out. Can you help us by saying you will support the DREAM Act, and if it includes this and it includes its policy there. So I think good advocacy things that people can do are number one, make sure you're in touch with your member of Congress or other members of Congress that you know. Two, make sure you're in touch with your senators. And then when you have that opportunity to sit down with people, don't ask for someone's support on an issue. Tell them exactly what you want them to do. You want them to co-sponsor the bill, and you want them to publicly call for it to come to a vote. You want their vote when it's coming up for final passage. That specificity, I think, is really important, because the easiest thing a politician can give when you say, hey, could you have your support on this issue? They're always going to say yes. And I think nailing down co-sponsorships and move them up that chain there is ultimately what's going to get this done.
I think that's a great point. I can also tell you from my vantage point, I'll meet regularly with members of Congress who, we're a nonpartisan organization, but you'll see them kind of thick as thieves with a picture of them and President Trump. And you sort of go in as an immigration organization feeling like you need to have your body armor on as you're advocating around immigration. And they will, start out by saying, I care deeply about immigration. It's been an issue of revitalization for my city, or my constituents, businesses care about this a lot. And I think, to Todd's point, part of this is asking them to not just say that behind closed doors, right? But actually voting the right way and saying the right thing, because I do think that we need to have more vocal supporters on this. And then Brent, I want to ask you in terms of people. You've obviously represented clients who are aging out, who are dependent spouses. Kind of from your vantage point as an immigration lawyer, kind of what have you been seeing as of late?
Well, well, actually, what I've been seeing during this particular week is a lot of amazing advocacy and exactly what we need to see. I started doing this practice of immigration law 25 years ago, but 20 years ago I got involved in helping widows of U.S. citizens who were being deported because they'd been married less than 2 years, and that was the law. You know, if your U.S. citizen spouse died before you were married 2 years, you could be deported, even with a child. So we started doing just what you're doing, which is going around to offices and cramming yourselves in there and telling your stories, going and talking to the media, because the media is the fourth branch of government. Okay, filing lawsuits. We filed a class action lawsuit, challenging on equal protection grounds this disparate, discriminatory treatment that people are getting, pressing the administration to see what they can do. Here, the administration could do some things to lessen the pain, to keep you all here doing the good work that you're doing. DACA was important for those advocates to be able to stay here, to be able to keep contributing to their communities, to be able to advocate for change. We need something like that for your community. We need it urgently, and we need it now. And so you're doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing, and there is hope. It took me and the group of widows and widowers about 6 years to change 5 words in the statute. But we did it. And you can do it too, and you're doing exactly what you need to do. But the one thing is, though, that only VIPs can do this. And how many of you here are VIPs? Please, all of you, raise your hand, because you're all very important. Every single thing that you do makes a difference. Keep a notebook. Call, put the year, because it might take a couple of years, but you really need to start calling news stations. If you have a story, tell them your story. You start visit the offices, call them on a weekly basis. Anyone can do this, and then tell your friends about it too, and ask them to do something too. Anyone can make a difference.
Yeah, clearly we have a humble group here in terms of underestimating your power. I want to talk about the green card backlog. And so maybe I'll start by asking just, there's an estimated more than 1 million people, again, mostly of Indian origin, who are stuck in the employment-based green card backlog. And though we are in 2022, in some ways we feel like we are back a century ago when it was the 1920s and we were talking about quotas per country. So maybe I'll ask either Todd or Deep to come in to this conversation and just talk a little bit about why is the backlog so large, and why is it affecting so many people of Indian origin?
So the green card backlog, it primarily affects Indian immigrants, and the primary reason for that is there's a law that there's a 7% per country caps on employment-based visas. So our immigration system has 2 primary ways you can get green cards: through the employment-based system, if you're sponsored by an employer, or the family-based system. So under the employment-based system, there's a quota of 7% based on your country of birth. Unfortunately, there's more qualified applicants from India that were born in India than the number of available spots at the 7% quota. So essentially what happens is every year there's going to be a backlog that continues to grow. and over the last decade, for the most part, it's really gotten a lot worse, and I think it's reaching over 1.2 million.
Appreciate that. And then, Meghna, I want to ask you about the dependent spouse restrictions. Your documentaries really feature, in a very personal way, the brave immigrant women who have faced these unjust restrictions on dependent spouse visas. So can you describe some of the restrictions and the impact that they've had on the women that you've interviewed?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for asking. So when you're on a dependent spouse visa, basically you don't have any status in the country. You don't have a social security number. You can't open your own bank account. In many states, you can't even get a driver's license without your husband. I remember I had gone, with my husband's passport, and they said, where's your husband? I said, he's working. I have his passport, and that wasn't enough. He needed to be there physically. And in the case of abusive husbands, they're not going to show up if they don't want the woman to get a license. Also, you cannot volunteer anywhere. You can only volunteer for nonprofits. So these are, the restrictions. But of course, that leads to even more deeper issues, such as, women losing their self-confidence, struggling with anxiety, depression, which affects their relationships with their spouses, their children. There are a lot of divorces. Of course, one woman I interviewed, her husband actually sent her back to India saying, you need to go back, I'm going to send, the documents, we need to get our papers renewed. And then he decided that he didn't want her to come back. So he never sent the documents. She was stuck there for years. She developed an acute, very rare virus when she was bedridden for 6 months. And that's just one story of like millions of stories of abuse. And then of course there's exploitation, by employers who promise women green cards and H1s, and they don't, they really make them work very hard, they don't get it. In the case of women who have got the EAD, I've found a lot of them overcompensate, working 2-3 times more than, trying to make up for the gap. So, technically you've lost the prime working years of your life. And so by the time you get your green card or even the EAD, you're in your 40s. By then, you have children, you're, balancing your family life as well as this. So it pretty much, destroys your life, I would say. And then on top of that, these are people, who the US has invited. They're highly skilled workers, so they have been invited here. And this is the way their spouses and children are being treated. It's just inconceivable in this day and age.
Now I want to shift gears and talk about Afghan and Ukrainian refugees. Part of what I wanted to do with this panel was not just talk about any specific issue, because candidly, part of why we see such significant challenges in immigration is you have constituencies around specific and sometimes narrow issues, but the reality is there is a broader movement, right, that we have to build. And so I want to direct this question, Todd, to you. Whether it was the crisis we saw in the evacuation of of Afghans, or with Ukrainian refugees who have come to the U.S. On the one hand, there has been stronger support, frankly, than we have seen in historical examples. I think it's pretty poignant when, in the Syrian crisis in 2015, we had 31 governors come out against welcoming Syrian refugees. And part of what you saw was Islamophobia. But last year, when we welcomed Afghan allies, we had 37 governors come out in favor of welcoming Afghan refugees. I went on to Glenn Beck and sort of thought I was going into the lion's den, but he was incredible about saying, what can my audience do to help? So Todd, I want to ask you kind of, what is the misinformation that we are hearing about these groups, but also what is the opportunity that we have in welcoming some of these specific demographics that may have more bipartisan support than other groups?
I'll start on the misinformation question. I think it is really important to be clear that there is an exceedingly well-funded and organized anti-immigrant movement in this country. Like, this isn't just some latent opinion that exists out there. There are groups who, are very clear. They will talk about things like, they will use scary terms They'll scare people around things around the border and talk about security. They'll scare people about Syrian refugees. When you read their policy papers, it's really clear they want to shut down legal immigration as much as possible. They'll use terms like moratorium, and they will scare people with pictures at the southwest border. And then when you look at things like the RAISE Act that were introduced previously, it was geared towards slashing family-based immigration, incredibly geared towards shutting off immigration from Asia. And I just think, that is really important to understand. We live in an ecosystem in which people are not trying to play on a fair field around facts, and people will lie about economics and all sorts of things there. I think when you look at what happened with Afghanistan, I'll speak personally for a second. I think it was personally very thrilled to see a war come to an end there, and deeply disappointed, to put it mildly, in the manner in which planning went into the extraction of roughly 250,000 people who had served alongside and in support of our armed forces there. But you saw this real commitment, and I think that is real, and bipartisan support there. I think 37 governors. It is a real sea change from what we saw 7 years ago. But you continue to see, and I think, as a policy organization, we haven't passed the Afghan Adjustment Act yet. In Ukraine, you have seen a similar folks who have stepped up to welcome folks there. And at the same time, you have seen the disparate treatment of people who are in Ukraine, most of whom come to someplace else, who are Black, for example, who've been treated disparately at the border there. And we need to have ultimately not just the ability, I think we should welcome people in these moments here, but where we fall down is when we're not building capacity for the long term, when the refugee resettlement organizations, I'm not the expert on this call on this, are being intentionally starved of funds by a previous administration, where we don't have the ability to have people come on an H-1B and get those rights right away as a spouse, or get onto a green card right away. We need resilient legal immigration avenues that are working for all the different ways, with forced migration, employment-based migration, family-based migration, and the overlap between them that works. And so we should welcome these people. We need to surge the best of what America can do into those moments, but we need to build capacity in the long term so we can be ready to do that.
Yeah, Todd, and I think it's really important to understand that even though the Obama administration has been more welcoming than the prior administration, we are well over halfway through the fiscal year. And though President Biden increased the number of refugees that could be admitted from all over the world to 125,000, we've only accepted 13,400. And this is one of those issues, right, where there has been historically bipartisan support. We actually resettled the highest number of refugees under President Reagan. One of President Reagan's last speeches talked about the importance of immigration. So I think, Todd, your point in terms of that employment authorization, kind of that pathway to citizenship is obviously critical. And I want to segue now to one of the last two questions I'm going to ask, which is related to sort of the economy. So, 11.5 million jobs are going unfilled right now. I think we've tried to explain that immigrants are not coming to steal Americans' jobs. In many cases, they are filling jobs that would otherwise go unfilled. But I think at the same time, there is this kind of view of the model minority, right? There is this view of, especially when you think about South Asian immigrants as, high-skilled STEM workers or, doctors. And in recent weeks, we've seen a UPenn law professor, as well as Tucker Carlson, make disparaging remarks about immigrants coming and trying to sort of take over. So I want to open this up to anyone on the panel who wants to discuss this, but we also know that members of the South Asian community are filling key roles, whether that is, Uber drivers or hospital workers, store clerks. And I think it's really important to kind of acknowledge that, 600,000 plus of these workers are estimated to be undocumented. I think we're slowly coming out of the pandemic, but we know so many of these immigrants were essential workers on the front lines. So how do we ensure that we are making headway on specific policy issues, but that we're also taking care of all immigrant populations? Is that possible?
Anyone?
Go ahead, Brent.
Well, I think some perspective is needed because I think this anti-immigrant rhetoric obviously comes from some racist backgrounds, but others are just simply misinformed. And I think most people don't understand, with 329 million people in this country, we admit as permanent residents 1 million, and half of those 1 million are spouses of U.S. citizens. This is a 0.25% of the U.S. population each year immigrates legally. It is a very small amount. And then on the employment side, 140,000 is the cap. And they count family members. So that's not even the workers, it's the spouses, children. So a small amount. And then for the national origin discrimination we have here, 7%. 7% of that is a few thousand per year. If the backlog is 200,000, that's why they come up with a 100-year wait. You see, I have clients who immigrated when I was first practicing from India, all different countries, and if you immigrated in the 90s, you do not understand the struggles that are happening to people today, or in 90s or before, because the backlogs were not that long. But if you want to look to people who've been struggling for many decades, look to Mexico and the Philippines. If you want to petition for your child, you're going to wait 3 decades. And that's why people come illegally, because they want to join their family members and the law doesn't allow them. The Indian community and soon the Chinese community are going there very soon. We need massive revamping of our immigration laws, and Numbers USA is against it, and they have a stranglehold on the GOP. And so how do you do that? How do you untie that? What you have to do is go on to the media and start being interviewed about your story. Cite these statistics. Please know your statistics, because it is unfair, the system we have, and it's not serving America's interests at all. It is just feeding into the demagoguery and the racist sentiments. And if you just tell it like it is, it's actually very clear that we have an insufficient number of immigrants.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think, the power of telling a personal story should not be underestimated. Like, there was one of the women I interviewed who got her H4 EAD. She started a hospital, and she actually employs over 100 US citizens, and they were, frontline workers during COVID. But not too many people know about this, so we have to change the narrative and, really take it into our own hands, because even when I told my story, nobody knew about this. When it's screened in front of members of Congress, they were amazed, because they were like, we just get numbers, we get statistics. But now that we're hearing your story, we're realizing that there's a human being behind every number. So, that's something that every one of us here can do, I think.
Okay, and final question I'm going to do is sort of rapid fire. We know that an inclusive immigration system isn't something that we can just sort of dream with ambition. We need to act with ambition. So can you give the audience one thing that they can do? Deep, I'll start with you.
One thing everyone can do, and I think this has been mentioned before today, earlier, but is to tell your story or the story of someone you know that's impacted. That makes a real difference. It could be, like Brent said, to the media or to your member of Congress, but telling those personal stories to the officials that can actually help. Your personal story, others' personal stories, and I think that's really what's helped us create that awareness for this particular problem. And I think doing that, touching up on your last question as well, doing that is, I think, what will make it possible for even more comprehensive immigration reform to happen, because what prevents that from happening is most Americans also don't understand that it's really not, there really is no pathway, right? There's no real line that people can get into to come here or to do that. So educating them on that, making them realize that, and I think the support would be there.
Yeah, I agree with Deep. On a similar vein, I think, the dialogue is important, and I think dialogue is very different from having a conversation. A dialogue really needs effort. It needs effort to go beyond, our own preconceived notions. And I think, instead of waiting for the other person to take the lead, I think, we should all let go of our own. And this is something I really struggle with, trying to do every day, because we all believe we are right. But, how do we look at things from each other's point of view and, have unity around about, the issues that, we are fighting for. And so in order to advocate for something, first of all, we need awareness, because unless we are aware of something, we can't develop an empathy for it. And so, just having dialogue, like maybe tonight in the gala, like talking to somebody about, something that you're not aware of, learning from them, I think that's really a good starting point.
My only comment is don't do nothing.
Okay, that was short. Todd.
That's pretty hard, and I shouldn't talk very much. I think we can do all these things we've talked about. The very same people who we've talked about here, who want to stop a pathway to citizenship and don't want to clear the backlog and want to cut immigration for family-based and employment-based, will all say, well, you can't do X because like you really Y, and they pit folks against one another. And I think we are living in a world in which the American immigration system is essentially and this was said at the top of the speech, so I'll close here. We are living in the world where we have strong echoes from the 1920s. We live in an immigration system that was built as a reaction to that and trying to fix that in the middle of the 20th century. And what we need is an immigration system that accomplishes all the things we've talked about, that leads us into the middle of the 21st century. And we can do that, and we can do all of these things. And it's not about like one versus another. And I think we have to keep that in mind. Like, we are not the defenders of the status quo, and we are not to blame for the faults of it. We are transforming and building a new system.
Appreciate that. And I'm going to use moderator's prerogative to just say that, look, we need every single one of you to be involved. So if you are a business owner or an employer, hire our clients, because we've got a lot of them. If you are a lawyer, help Brent in terms of the number of pro bono lawyers that we need. If you're a communications expert, I think the technical term is that we suck at comms, because Deep is exactly right. When people say, oh, well, they should come the right way, or, well, they're coming for economic reasons, we haven't messaged what this issue is about. And if you want to roll up your sleeves and get involved, there are absolutely ways. This is going to be the battlefield in the next couple of years, and it is going to be a fight for the heart of our nation. So please get involved, and thanks for hearing this panel.
So with that, we've reached the closing of our summit. I just want to say a couple of things before you all head out, and we'll thank our panelists again in a second. One, I have to thank the Impact team, in particular Sarah Shaw, who did an amazing job planning this entire summit. And I mean, Sarah, you can tell, could be delivering at any moment, and so we're very thrilled that she delivered this summit prior to that. Impact has 12 weeks paid leave, just saying. But I want to thank, obviously, our panelists for raising this issue, the incredible advocacy. I remember the first time I met Deep and I learned about the issue. And I think that's probably true for many of you here. You may not have even known of the status of Dreamers from our community, and this issue that really has not been given the time of day. It has, thanks to their work, but not to the point where we need to get it. So one of the lessons we learned, we met with Senator Schumer a few weeks back, and he said, if you want to move policy, you have to have leaders in every community, whether it's just civically engaged people around the country talking to their members of Congress, talking to their senators, raising the issues that we're talking about today. So, we have a national crowd here today, and we've met together in DC, but in terms of what we want to create with Impact is a group of leaders in every community, whether it's from Houston to the Bay Area to Chicago to New York to Philadelphia, around the country so that we have leaders who can talk to their senators and move these issues forward. And as you said, to tell the story is how we're going to address these issues that are so patently unfair. And I think we have the confidence that when people learn the facts and they learn what kind of immigration system we had, as we mentioned, is still a remnant of the 1920s, that they will change and they will make progress and change the rules so that people who are in every sense of the word American, as the folks that we're talking about are actually able to stay here and contribute to the country, because we're at a loss without them. With that, I just wanted to tell you, if you want to be a part of Impact more deeply, some of you may be here for the first time, we want to grow nationally. This is the first ever time we've done this. We have an incredible team. When I started just a year and a half ago, I was the one employee. As an independent contractor, we now have 8 full-time staff, and we're continuing to grow. Thanks again to Deepak Raj for being an amazing initial investor, co-founder, for starting that. Thanks to many folks, Raj Gupta, Narendra Malani, Hemant Garadia, Pradeep Singh, others who have really stepped up to help us create the institution that our community needs to build in order to address these issues and to build political power. So I'm very excited to have you all tonight for the reception at 6:30. Please, you can go up to the lobby if you want to hang around and meet with other folks, and come back here at 6:30. If you're an elected official, come back at 6 so we can get a Desi Electeds photo with all of you. But with that, I just want to thank you all again. It's really a pleasure and a privilege to see you all in one room. And please thank our panelists again.